Well, ladies and gentlemen, I finally finished it. If you're watching this right now, it means I have officially succeeded in finishing my biggest project that I've ever completed so far, ranking every single cup in the entire Mario Kart series. Mario Kart is probably my favorite gaming franchise of all time, and I really wanted to make one big video that I could use to fully show my appreciation for this series. So that's exactly what I plan to do today, as I take a look at every cup in the series to determine which are the best and which are not the best. Now, I want to get this intro out of the way rather quickly, since this video is already going to be the longest one I'll ever make for a while, but let me lay down some rules. First, you know the drill. No spin-offs are going to count, mainline games only. I do this because it would be unfair to judge live home circuits tracks against, real tracks. Arcade GP would be extremely inconvenient and most likely pretty expensive, and Tour would just be ridiculous. So I'm only going to count the main 8 games for this, 9 if you count the BCP separately. The only exception to this is the all-cup Tour from Double Dash because, why would I even bother? Secondly, even though I could easily just make a ranking of all the tracks and then use my averages to determine how I'd rank each cup, I'm not going to do that. Instead, I'm going to look at the cups as if they were individual levels and judge them based on a lot of factors. The quality of the courses is definitely a major factor, but I also want to take into consideration the consistency of each cup, how well the tracks are organized, and how good it feels to play as one cohesive experience. That way, that'll make the video much more fun than if I had just calculated everything and the placements were just based on math. Third, this video is going to require me to talk about pretty much every single course in the series to some extent, so don't be too mad if I don't spend a lot of time on each individual track. I try to go as in-depth as I could, but I'm also doing all of this out of a Microsoft Surface, and I think if I made this video much longer, it would catch on fire. That said, this video is certainly not going to be perfect, so if there's a track that you don't think I did a very good job elaborating on my thoughts of, please let me know in the comments. And lastly, these are just my thoughts, but I'd love to hear yours. If you feel passionately about a certain cup and want to tell me about it, again, please tell me in the comments, because I'd love to hear it. With all that preamble out of the way, thanks for 100 subscribers, probably more by the time this comes out, and let's finally dive into my official ranking of every single cup in the Mario Kart series. So I didn't split this video up into tiers initially, but you'll find it kind of noticeable that there's still kind of like certain tiers of cups that tend to rank near each other. The ones near the bottom tend to be ones that are either just consistently bad all the way through with maybe only one good one, or just consistently mid all the way through. And then the ones above that tend to be the ones that are consistently alright all the way through, or cups that are split 50-50 between having good tracks and bad tracks. And then above that will be cups that tend to have 3 good courses and then 1 course dragging it down, and then above that are the ones that I consider perfect. All that is to say, there's very few cups in this series where I think they have nearly nothing going for them, but one of them had to rank in last, and that one is probably the only one that I do consider to have nothing going for it, that being number 65, Super Mario Kart Star Cup. I know it's not surprising or a hot take to see a Super Mario Kart cup so low, but this cup has nearly nothing going for it. It's one of the only cups in the whole series where I'd say it has pretty much no courses that I enjoy playing, as in if you asked me right now if I wanted to play any of these, I would pass pretty much every single time. Starting off with Koopa Beach 1, and to hand it to Nintendo, I guess this is one of the less frustrating courses in this game. It still kinda sucks and is basically just one big circle, but I'm not infuriated to play on it like some others, and it's not impossible for me to have fun on it. It makes me feel nothing. Then we have Choco Island 2, which, I've seen shittier things with a brown color palette. Again, not the worst, but it's still super annoying to play with this really narrow piece of road with the piranha plants and these bumps that are hard to control being the biggest offenders. I guess I kinda like the big diarrhea puddle because I think it's funny, but that's really all this course has going for it. Then we probably have the worst course out of this already bad selection, that being Vanilla Lake 1. I don't know, I've never really liked either of the Vanilla Lakes in this game, and I'm convinced that many of the obstacles in this one are just placed to be as mildly annoying as possible. The ice bricks in the road can be nearly impossible to dodge sometimes, especially because of how incredibly slippery this course is. It's so annoying, and the aesthetic doesn't help it at all since it's basically just white. The only saving grace of this course in my eyes is the music, which isn't anywhere near the greatest music in this series, or hell, even in this cup, but I don't know, I think it's pleasant and is less annoying than the course it's on. Then we have Bowser Castle 3, the best course in the cup, which I'd put in C tier. Yeah, I think this course is fine to drive on, and it definitely has one of the better layouts in this game.
But that's not saying much!
I just think that the slippery controls of this game are a huge detriment to this course, and it makes it feel far more annoying as a result, and prevents me from thinking of it that highly. Fortunately, the Booster Course Pass remake basically fixed all of my problems with it, and made many parts that I actually liked, like the thwomps and jump section, even better, but we gotta wait a while before we can talk more about that. For now, we've got this version, and it's fine. Finally, to end off this cup, we've got Mario Circuit 4. I have literally nothing to say about this course. It's so forgettable that when playing through this game again for the video, I legitimately thought that this was Mario Circuit 3, and didn't realize that it was Mario Circuit 4 until literally writing this segment. Which I guess is understandable because, yeah. All in all, this cup is just a selection of mid to shitty courses, and like I said, it has pretty much nothing going for it. I'm sorry to be starting off so negative, but thankfully we can only go up from here, because that's how a ranking video works. Number 64, the Super Mario Kart Special Cup. Another cup from Super Mario Kart. Wow, what a shocker. Spoiler alert, none of these made it out of the bottom 10. This time we start off with Donut Plains 3, which I really hate. It's so annoying, and it's one of the many courses in this game that's made substantially worse by this game's physics. If you touch any racer in this game, you're bouncing 3 yards. It's basically lethal bumper cars, and it's really annoying on this track considering how unforgiving the obstacles are, from the broken bridge to the stupid moles that are a fun obstacle in concept, but in practice are just so annoying to dodge because there's so many of them. I just loathe playing on this track, and I never have fun on it. I'm fully aware that it's a skill issue, but then again, this is Super Mario Kart we're talking about. I do not feel like dedicating time to getting good at this game. Then we have Koopa Beach 2, which, like its predecessor, is fine and inoffensive. I don't particularly like it, but I don't hate it either and can have mild enjoyment from it sometimes. Then we have Ghost Valley 3, which is just pretty boring and annoying. I don't really have anything to say about it. I guess I kinda liked the speed boost and the jump, and that's pretty much all. It's fine. After that comes Vanilla Lake 2, which is just as annoying as Vanilla Lake 1. The ice blocks now come in giant walls, and jumping between the little islands in the water isn't really that fun, especially if you don't do it perfectly, because then it takes forever to get back to the shore. Again, I must reiterate, it feels like the Vanilla Lakes were made just specifically to fuck with you. It's like the Super Mario Bros. The Lost Levels of Mario Kart tracks. But fortunately, what puts this cup above the last one is that we actually get to end off with the first course that we've talked about in this video that I actually enjoy, that being Rainbow Road. While I do prefer both remakes that this course got in the future, the layout of this course is still something to be appreciated, and its challenge can actually be really fun and compelling, unlike the other tracks in this game. It's a very well-made track, and I'm glad that future games gave it the glow-up it deserved. All in all, though, this cup is just pretty annoying to play through, and most of these tracks just feel specifically designed to mess you up. I managed to get through it using only pure skill, but it's still quite annoying, and I don't ever really find myself wanting to revisit it. Number 63, Mario Kart DS's Shell Cup. Finally, I get to bitch about something other than Super Mario Kart. First we've got Mario Circuit 1 from Super Mario Kart. There's nothing to say about this course. It's one of the most basic tracks from a game already filled with basic tracks, except for the fact that for some inexplicable reason, DS shortened the SNES courses from 5 laps to 3, so this course regularly gets done in under a minute. I don't know why they did this, but it makes this remake that much more forgettable. Then we have N64 Moo Moo Farm, not to be confused with the cooler and younger brother, Moo Moo Meadows. And again, it's fine, but it's one of the most basic courses from Mario Kart 64. I guess I kinda like the moles as an obstacle, but other than that, there's really nothing going on here. After this, we have GBA Peach Circuit, one of the most basic courses from Super Circuit. Are you sensing a pattern here? I mean, again, there's nothing to say about this. It's fine. And ending off the cup, we have GCN Luigi Circuit, which they ruined! You can't drive backwards on the track anymore, and without that, this is, again, just a basic first track. There's nothing to say about it, and even though it's my favorite of the cup, it's still nothing special, especially with its main gimmick gone. All in all, a pretty bad selection here, but it's still somewhat understandable since this is the first retro cup ever put in a Mario Kart game. It's at least kinda cute that they used the first courses from most of the games that were out at the time. Aside from N64, where they used the second course from that game, I assume because the hot air balloon in Luigi Raceway would have caused the DS to catch on fire. But because of that, this cup is painstakingly lame to play. Anyway, it's time to complain about Super Mario Kart some more. Number 62, the Super Mario Kart Flower Cup. The Flower Cup in Super Mario Kart is still a bit of an improvement compared to the other ones we've discussed so far, but it still sucks. I'm honestly just ready to eliminate this game from the rankings, so let's get through this quick. First off in this cup is Choco Island 1, which is fine. I have no strong feelings about it one way or the other, and I think the little bumps are cute, but then again, there's no diarrhea puddle. What the flip? This is bullshit. 0 out of 10 would not recommend. Then we go to Ghost Valley 2, which is also just okay. At least it's a cool feather shortcut in this one, and I like the speed boost, plus this track is a bit wider than a lot of the others, which makes it a little easier to drive on. But most of this track just has nothing going on. It's pretty forgettable, just like most of the tracks in this game. Speaking of forgettable, then we go to Donut Plains 2. I don't like how windy this track is, and the obstacles, again, feel specifically placed to mess you up. Especially this big random-ass pond in the middle of the road and this slippery part where if you drift even a little, you will spin out of control. I don't really like it. After that comes Bowser Castle 2, which is fine. The dead end doesn't bother me as much as it seems to bother other people, especially since once you know it's there, it's pretty easy to avoid. The split path part is a fine idea in concept, but in practice it just feels a little janky. Other than that, I mean, the jumps are cooler, I guess. I don't know. Bowser Castle 3 did it better, but I'll take what I can get at this point. And then we end off with Mario Circuit 3. I'm so damn tired of seeing this track. It's in 5 games. I don't have to think about it ever again, but for the sake of this list, I guess I'll have to talk about it quite a bit. I guess this version is okay compared to this game's tracks, but even compared to the other Mario circuits in this game, it feels pretty weak. I don't know, man. I really don't know what else to say about this game's tracks. They mostly all evoke a similar feeling of either nothingness or annoyance in me, and most of the tracks in this cup are no different. I'm ready to get it out of the ranking already, but we have a few more cups to talk about before we get to that. Thankfully, the next couple cups are not from Super Mario Kart, so at least I get to take a break from it for a short minute. Number 61, the Mario Kart 64 Special Cup. This cup is quite an improvement over the last few, mainly because it actually starts off with a course I like. DKH Jungle Parkway is actually a ton of fun, and it's one of my favorites from this game. It's got one of the more fun layouts in Mario Kart 64, and the track itself has lots of strategic things that you can do in order to get ahead, such as the giant ramp where you can control which direction you shoot off just before you get launched, and this cave shortcut that always feels super satisfying to pull off. It makes it feel like you have a lot more control of your strategy than a lot of the other courses in this game, where it can sometimes just feel like luck. It always feels super exciting to play, and I always have a really good time on it. Then we have Yoshi Valley, which is okay. I don't know, I never really cared for this version, and while the branching paths and not being able to see where your placement is seems like a good gimmick in concept, in practice it can be kinda annoying to not know where you are in relation to everyone, especially when you're trying to go for first place. Plus the fastest paths are all insanely thin and can be really tricky to drive on with this game's pretty slippery controls. It's a course that I respect for what it tries to go for, but I don't really like playing on too terribly much. However, then we get to a course that I don't respect or like, Banshee Boardwalk. This course stinks. There's no off-road, barely any compelling obstacles except for in this dingy building section. Most of the track just comprises of driving on this samey boring boardwalk that's remarkably difficult to stay on top of, and if you make even the slightest wrong turn, you're sent plummeting into the water, where you have to wait in shame for what feels like an eternity while you wait for Lakitu to pull you back out, by which time you're probably already in the back. It's so annoying and I hate this track for it. Like I said, there's not even any off-road, which means that there's not even really any easy way to catch up to the other racers if you fall. You're just stuck driving and praying that you get good items so you can catch up to everybody else. And after that we end off with a Rainbow Road. While this Rainbow Road does succeed in the visual department and making you feel like you've reached the last leg of your journey, this course is boring. It's long and tedious and basically 4 to 5 minutes of just road and occasionally a chain jump. I guess the track jump shortcut is pretty cool if you can pull it off, but other than that, this course feels more like a playable celebration ceremony than an actual course. All in all, this cup has one course I really like, 2 courses I really don't like, and 1 course that I don't know. So all in all, a fairly disappointing cup and definitely the worst one in Mario Kart 64. And now we get to our first of many Mario Kart 8 Deluxe cups in this video. Most of these are fairly solid, but which one of them is the worst one? Well, it was a tiny bit of toss-up between this one and another one that we'll get to later, but at the end of the day, I think I have to give the title of my least favorite cup in all of Mario Kart 8 Deluxe to number 60, the Cherry Cup. When Wave 5 came out, I was huffing some serious copium regarding a lot of the tracks in this cup, so I didn't really think much of it, but looking back at it now, yeah, this cup is pretty terrible. We start off with Tour Los Angeles Labs, probably the most forgettable tour course. There are tour courses that I dislike more, but I just never remember that this one exists. It just feels so lame to drive on most of the time, and while the baseball stadium is sort of cool, and the oil rig is honestly pretty funny as an inclusion in my opinion, it doesn't really make up for the large amount of nothing that this course offers. After that, we go to, yeah, I have pretty much nothing new to offer on the GBA Sunset Wilds remake, but for the sake of cohesion, I'll just say the stuff that pretty much everyone already knows about it. It's boring, it's somehow just as flat as it was on the GBA aside from one ramp. The Shy Guys are somehow boring in this version when they were such a compelling obstacle in the original. The course is ugly, the multicolored blocks are stupid, the shortcut feels completely unsatisfying to pull off. Oh yeah, they also forgot the most important gimmick of the track, you know, the sunset. I pretty much only refer to this course as Wilds all the time with my friends just to make sure nobody forgets this atrocious error. I mean, without that, this entire course would already feel noticeably worse, and then you factor in all the other terrible changes to it, and you have one of the most embarrassing remixes in the entire series. Speaking of which, after this we get to Wii Koopa Cape. I swear, I've only grown to hate this course more and more with time. I got Phantom Menaced hard at this track's release because I didn't see anything wrong with it. Sure, I was a little bummed out that they messed up the underwater section, but I mean, it's Koopa Cape. It was my favorite track as a kid. How could I possibly hate it now? And then I replayed the original and realized that, yeah, this remake blows in like every possible way. It feels noticeably stiffer to drive on. It's ugly. The underwater section is still broken. There's still a noticeable lack of the electric obstacles. It just makes me sad to think about, especially considering how great what we once had was. I swear, it just gets worse and worse in my mind over time, and I can't really think of a single thing that this didn't ruin from the original, aside from, I guess, the music. So, I know what you're thinking. That's not true, I don't, but for the sake of argument, I'm gonna assume that I know what you're thinking. Wow, a mid-tour track and 2 butchered remakes in a row? How could you possibly rank this cup anywhere higher than last? Well, the answer is that the 4th track in this cup is Vancouver Velocity, and I actually kinda like that track, I guess, whatever. It's pretty, I like the nighttime aesthetic, and the city nights look phenomenal. And the layout is pretty good for a tour track as well. It's nothing incredible, but I don't know, I just like playing on it. It's genuinely carrying this cup hard. So to lay it all out, we have, again, 1 course I really like, 1 course I think is just okay, and 2 courses that are absolutely butchered. It's honestly pretty on par with the Mario Kart 64 Special Cup, but I ranked this one higher just because of how much I despise Banshee Boardwalk. Now we get to our final Super Mario Kart Cup in the whole video, number 59, the Super Mario Kart Mushroom Cup. If you came here just to see every Super Mario Kart Cup ranked, you can click off the video after this. I can't imagine which one of you that would be, but it was nice having you here. Sorry I complained about your favorite game so much. Anyway, the Mushroom Cup in this game is easily the best one, mostly because I don't really hate any of the courses in it. I don't really like most of them, but hey. We start off with Mario Circuit 1. It has pipes. I like this one big sand section that you can cut through if you have a mushroom. Other than that, there's quite literally nothing going on here. Then we go to Donut Plains 1, which is probably my favorite out of all of the Donut Plainses, mainly because it's simple enough to not be excruciatingly annoying. There's still not really anything to talk about, but there's also no glaring problems. The real reason is because I'm really bad at this game, and it's the easiest one. Then there's Ghost Valley 1, which is probably also my favorite out of all of the Ghost Valleys. It's because it's the easiest one, and I'm really bad at this game. I actually kind of liked its layout, and the feather shortcut always feels pretty satisfying to pull off. After that is Bowser Castle 1, which again, I don't hate, but don't like. I have no strong feelings about it one way or the other. I like the section with the jumps, I guess, but again, Bowser Castle 3 did it better. And finally we have Mario Circuit 2, which is in contention with Rainbow Road for being my favorite course in this game. Not the greatest compliment in the world, considering those are the only real 2 good courses that I can think of off the top of my head. But I still think this track is pretty good, with the biggest standout being the giant jump in the middle, where you have to be strategic on where you land. I really like it, and the rest of the track is a pretty decent layout too. All in all, this cup is fine, which makes it my favorite cup in Super Mario Kart. And with that, Super Mario Kart is the first game to be eliminated from the rankings. And despite what you all may think, considering how much I've complained about this game, I don't actually hate it. It's a fine time waster, and I feel indifferent to a majority of the tracks. It's fine, that's really the best I can say about it. Anyway, time to talk about actually good games some more. Number 58, the Mario Kart Wii Shell Cup. Now we come to what is, in my opinion, the worst cup in Mario Kart Wii, that being the Shell Cup. It's not a particularly bad cup, just a pretty bland one. And while I don't dislike any of the courses here, I absolutely don't ever want to go out of my way to play any of them when I play this game. Starting off with GCN Peach Beach, which is just kind of bland and boring here. I kind of liked it on the GameCube, but here it doesn't feel that special compared to a lot of the other tracks. I like the Cataquax and the Big Penis Rock, but other than that, this course really doesn't feel like anything special here. Still, it's probably my favorite of the cup. Because it's still fine, it just feels like this course was far more suited to the GameCube's physics rather than this game's physics. Here it just feels a lot more boring. We then go to DS Yoshi Falls, which is pretty fine and inoffensive. There's not really anything going on for the majority of it, and really nothing to talk about. The waterfalls are okay as a shortcut, but really nothing groundbreaking. Then we get to SNES Ghost Valley 2. I can't escape this game. This course is fine here. The falling blocks on the sides are a good obstacle in theory, and if I remember correctly, this is the only course in 3D that actually does that, which is pretty cool. But I've hardly ever hit them, and the course is remarkably easy here. I guess it feels okay to drive on, but the layout and the aesthetic still leave a lot to be desired, and it sticks out like a sore thumb in this game, considering how they never really significantly updated any retro tracks till we got to Mario Kart 8. I know that this is a Shell Cup track, so it's not really reasonable to assume the most difficult thing is going to be here, but at least give us something, you know? Then we end off with N64 Mario Raceway, which is, say it with me again, just okay. There's a pipe that's pretty much all that the obstacles on this course amount to. There's a few somewhat fun shortcuts that you can take, but other than that, this course is just a pretty bland, inoffensive Mario circuit track. So all in all, a pretty lame cup with no real stinkers, but no standouts whatsoever. Number 57, the Mario Kart 64 Star Cup. This cup is yet another one that's just kind of boring and bland throughout, mostly filled with tracks that I think are fine, but nothing too special. Starting off, we have Wario Stadium, not to be confused with Wario Stadium. And this track is pretty whatever. It can feel fun to drive on sometimes, and there are some really impressive shortcuts that can be done on it, but all in all, it just feels like it hasn't really reached its full potential, being in a game without a trick system at all. And from the looks of it, it probably never will, considering that Nintendo is desperately trying to cover up this track's existence for some reason. Plus, this track does not fit well with this game's control scheme. If you go off of any of these ramps at a weird angle, you're spinning out immediately, which no other track in pretty much the entire series does. And that makes this track significantly more annoying to play. It also doesn't really do anything all that interesting with the fact that it's so long. I can deal with a long track, but this one doesn't really do anything interesting with it, and it's kind of sad because spending so much time here, you'd hope that this track would do something better, but it just doesn't do anything aside from ramps that are broken. Then we go to Sherbet Land, not to be confused with Sherbet Land. And in terms of ice tracks, I dare say that this is in fact one of them. The penguins are kind of fun to dodge, but most of this track is just annoying and jagged, and the only real standout part of it is the admittedly very pleasant music. Then we go to Royal Raceway, which is probably my favorite of the cup. It's pretty good, the castle is a really fun Easter egg, the shortcut through the grass is always super fun to take, and of course there's a standout, which is this big jump. I love the two tracks that did this in this game because at a time when you weren't really used to anything crazy like this in a Mario Kart game, seeing something like this felt like a huge deal, and it still feels exhilarating to do even today. Still, a lot of the track's layout besides that still does leave quite a bit to be desired, since this is pretty much just a basic circuit track. And so while this is the standout of the cup, I can't say it's an all-time favorite for me. And then we get to N64 Bowser's Castle, which is probably my first quote-unquote hot take in the video. Lots of people seem to dub this as one of their favorites from this game, and I just think it's okay. My real main issue with it is the part inside the castle itself. Most of the obstacles feel really annoyingly placed, and since this was at a time when rubber banding was still a thing, hitting any of these would send you back several places. And if you were trying to get first place, it could be quite annoying to have to catch up. Just to be completely clear, I'm fine with challenge in a Mario Kart course, but it should at least feel fair, and sometimes here, the thwomps could be so tightly placed together that, combined with the game's really slippery controls, it just doesn't feel challenging in a way that's all that fair. I'm just not that fond of this section, which is a shame because I think this track nails the spooky atmosphere that a Bowser's Castle track is meant to have. And if the thwomps placements just felt a bit more fair and it weren't for this annoying ass bridge, then I'd agree with everyone who calls this a classic. As it stands now, it's fine, but definitely my least favorite out of every 3D Bowser Castle track. I'm fully aware that this is a skill issue and probably just a personal thing, and if you love this track for its difficulty, then more power to you. I have plenty of tracks that I could say that for. I just think that it's all a bit much, especially with how poor the controls of this game already are. Basically, this is my Neo Bowser City. At the end of the day, this cup is another one that's just consistently throughout, and while Royal Raceway somewhat carries it, it's still not enough to raise it much higher than this. Number 56, the Mario Kart DS Banana Cup. This one also manages to stay consistently throughout the whole thing. First we have Donut Plains 1 from Super Mario Kart. Yeah, this version is pretty much unchanged from the original, aside from it now being in 3D. I have nothing new to add on about it that I didn't already say. It's still pretty boring. Next is N64 Frappe Snowland, which is also just pretty boring. It's marginally better here, since you can actually see the out-of-bounds boundaries more easily, but the snowman section is still annoying and the tunnel section is still very, very uninspired. As a remake, this doesn't really change anything significant, so it doesn't really do much to carry this cup. However, a course that does do quite a bit to carry this cup is GBA Bowser Castle 2. All of the GBA Bowser Castles are pretty solid, and this one isn't any different in that regard. It's nothing too crazy, but the jumps are fun to pull off, and you have to be slightly strategic on where you want to jump depending on where the other races are doing, and what angle you're trying to shoot off at. Again, it's not the most impressive course ever, but it's still a fun time and I enjoy it. However, we then end off with GCN Butchered Park. This is by far the worst version of Baby Park, since the items in this game aren't anything that crazy, so it feels noticeably less chaotic, and the track is now way too wide in 5 laps instead of 7, making this literally feel like a course for babies rather than the unforgettable chaotic time it was on Double Dash and 8. It just makes me sad, especially considering what we once had. So all in all, one good course, two fine courses, and one bad remake, but the quality doesn't really dip or rise too much in general. It's really just a fine cup, but a pretty forgettable one. I will say I might have ranked it a little higher, except it was really difficult to catch up with the CPUs on this cup considering how simple most of the courses are, which made it so that since I was going for first place, I had to play this cup over and over again, and when the cup was already not very fun and pretty lame, that really tired me out on these courses. I'm aware that this is probably just a skill issue, but I don't care, I'm ranking it how I want, and it probably still wouldn't have ranked much higher if I'm going to be completely honest. Honestly, with the exception of 7s, the shell and banana cups in this series tend to be pretty lame, which I guess is understandable. They're the first couple retro cups in every single game they're in, so they can't really get too crazy with the courses that they bring back, and because of this, usually their selections just turn out to be pretty lame, and it takes until we get to the Leaf and especially Lightning cups for us to get anything really good. I say all of this because we have 2 banana cups in a row, with number 55, Mario Kart 8's Banana Cup. This is just another cup that's just mid-courses back-to-back. We start off with GCN Dry Desert, one of the most nothing and uninspired remakes in this entire game. They basically took out everything that made the original salvageable and replaced it with the Oasis section, which I can kinda see the vision with, but it just feels kinda bland to me, and it doesn't seem like a proper replacement for the Piranha Plant or the Tornado. There's some fun shortcut opportunities, but all in all, this course is just pretty boring, and I never really choose to play on it. Then we have SNES Donut Plains 3, which admittedly did get a really great graphical overhaul, and has a cool shortcut opportunity in the water, but the layout is still quite boring, and when you're not on the bridge, it feels pretty much the same to drive on as the original, albeit with much better physics. Then we get to Royal Raceway, which again, looks great, but plays rather blandly. The big jump doesn't feel nearly as novel anymore, and this really just feels like any other circuit track now. It's not a butchered remake, but just a poorly aged one. And then this cup ends off with DK Jungle, which is definitely my favorite of the cup, and it's not even close. I'm not even really the biggest fan of the Donkey Kong Country games, as in I never really played much of them, but I still think that the layout of this track is good enough to appeal to me, and I especially like this glider path that you can take if you drift correctly into it, which lets you keep your glider for quite a while if you do the jump strategically enough. There's also the big skinny bridge, which is great to see on any course and gives ample trolling opportunity. And all in all, I just really enjoy this course. The only part that I don't really like is the temple section, but it does have the big banana statue, so I can't be too mad at it. Just a really solid course overall, but I'm not really willing to trudge through all of this mid to get to it, so this cup ranks pretty low as a result. Number 54, Mario Kart 7's Mushroom Cup. Honestly, 7 had a really solid cup selection, probably one of my favorite selections in the whole series. However, one of them had to end up in last, and I think that has to go to the Mushroom Cup in this game. This is just a simply nothing selection, with the exception of one course. There's Toad Circuit, which is as basic as circuit courses come. I know it's the first track in the game, so it can't be anything too crazy, but this one is just nothing. There's a glider and a couple of pipe shortcuts, but other than that, there's really nothing to talk about with this one. Then we go to Daisy Hills, which is basically meant to be the glider tutorial, and while it does a good job at that, and while there is a sorta neat shortcut at one point, it doesn't really do anything compelling beyond that. Again, there's not really anything to talk about. After that we go to Cheep Cheep Lagoon, which serves as the underwater tutorial, and pretty much nothing else. The skinny path on the side can be kinda fun to take, I guess, but other than that, there is, again, nothing to this one. However, after trudging through all of this mid, we get to Shy Guy Bazaar, and I'm gonna be honest, I really like this one. It wins over the others based on aesthetics alone, going for a more Super Mario Bros. 2-esque look. And it also just feels way better to play on than all of the other courses here. I like it a lot, but even with this, there isn't really too terribly much to talk about aside from the aesthetics. All in all, this isn't a terrible cup, and it serves as a good tutorial to this game, but it's one of the least interesting ones to play in the whole series. Number 53, Mario Kart DS's Mushroom Cup. DS's Mushroom Cup is pretty much on the exact same level of quality as 7's, and it's so similarly ordered that it's honestly kind of frightening. We start with a boring track and figure 8 circuit, just like 7, even though in my opinion this one is on a whole new level of boring that Toad Circuit can't even compare to. I mean, it's literally just an open road with no obstacles, no off-road, no nothing. It's one of the worst tracks in the entire series layout-wise because, I mean, it's nothing. It's just so bland and forgettable. I know I've been saying there's nothing to say about it about a lot of the tracks in these cups as an excuse to not write about it anymore, but with this one, it's just a figure 8. There's nothing to talk about. However, I still wish it got included in the Booster Course Pass over Toad Circuit because at least this one would have been really funny. Then we go to a boring hill track with Yoshi Falls. Just like 7's. I mean, again, it's so basic that there's really nothing to talk about with it that I didn't say already, especially because Wii made basically no layout changes whatsoever. Then we go to a boring Cheep Cheep theme track with Cheep Cheep Beach. Just like 7's, again, the similarities between these cups are almost uncanny. While this admittedly isn't as bad as Cheep Cheep Lagoon, it's still pretty in my eyes. I don't love it, I don't hate it, it's just decent. Then we end off with the best track in the cup that takes heavy aesthetical inspiration from another game. I don't even need to say it. However, I think the main reason this cup ranks above 7's Mushroom Cup is because I actually really like Mario Luigi's Mansion. I feel like it really matches the aesthetic of the game really well with its green and brown color palette that would look kinda drab in any other course, but it really stands out in this one. The building itself looks great, and while the outdoor section isn't as cool, I still really like it, and I think the walking trees are a pretty cool obstacle. Plus, trying to find the fastest path through the mud can be pretty fun as well. I just love everything that this track goes for, and it carries this cup without question. Still, with two of the most boring tracks in the series and one other track that I just find pretty forgettable, this cup can sit comfortably near the bottom. Number 52, the Mario Kart DS Lightning Cup. Jesus, I'm just now realizing how many DS cups ranked so low on this list. DS is everywhere, you can't hide from it, run from it. Here we have another classic case of a cup that has two courses I hate, one course I love, and one course that I don't really have any strong feelings on. We start with SNES Choco Island 2, which is probably undoubtedly the worst SNES remake in this game, and probably one of the worst courses in this game in general. It feels arguably worse here because of the DS's physics and how slippery the mud section is, as well as how giant the bumps are now. This course simply just did not carry over to a game like DS, and it really shows. And on top of all that, the course is ugly. Just a terrible remake, and one, in my opinion, that should never have come back. Then we get to N64 Banshee Boardwalk, which I like pretty much the same amount, that being not at all. I guess it feels a little bit better to play here since the DS's physics are less slippery than the N64's, but the boardwalk section is still empty, samey, and bland. The building section feels pretty much the same too, and I still don't really care for it that much. I just really dislike this track, I hope it never returns again. We can all just say that it got its shot in DS and doesn't need a remake because we already have this one. However, then things take up a massive step up with GBA Sky Garden, since this is probably my favorite version of this track, and I already really liked the original. Not only did it get a graphical update, but the shortcuts and layout are all pretty much perfectly intact, and the course still feels really amazing to play. And it carries over to 3D, probably the best out of any 2D retro course before 8. I really love it, and I'm especially glad that we never got a remake that ruins everything special about this course's layout. I'm sure glad that that never ever happened and that we were all just allowed to have this great remake. Next we have GCN Yoshi Circuit, which I'm honestly kind of mixed on here. On one hand, it's definitely the least butchered out of all of the GCN remakes in this game, but on the other hand, I don't know, it's just not the same. It looks so much drabber here, and I feel like a lot of the charm from the GameCube version is gone now. This is obviously due to the DS not having the processing power to include stuff like the waterfall, Yoshi-copter, tunnel shortcut, etc., which is understandable I guess, but I don't know, it just makes this course feel so much more lifeless. I still like it, but it's definitely my least favorite version of this track out there, and I don't find myself revisiting it that much. All in all, this is probably our first of many split cups where half the courses stink and the other half are good, but this version of Yoshi Circuit makes me sad to think about, and Choco Island and Banshee Boardwalk are both the bane of my existence, so this is definitely the worst out of all of the split cups in my opinion. Number 51, the Mario Kart 8 Shell Cup. This cup is fine, I don't hate it, but I don't really love it either. We start off with what is in my opinion the best of the cup, that being Wii Moo Moo Meadows. Not only does this track feel significantly better to play here thanks to 8's updated controls, but it just looks beautiful. It got one of the best graphical updates out of all of the base retros in my opinion, and it makes this course a treat just to look at. On top of that, they added in an extra glider at this one part, so you can fly over this section and really take in the visuals of this part. I don't know, I've always just really loved this remake, and it's absolutely my favorite of the cup. However, we then immediately go to GBA Mario Circuit, which, aside from the admittedly pretty cool part where the track gets lifted into the sky, this track doesn't really have anything going on, and that's a problem when that part only really takes up a small portion of the track. There's one hidden glider ramp, but the rest of it is just pretty boring and flat. At least the music is pretty incredible, though. Then we go to DS Cheep Cheep Beach, which is pretty much unchanged aside from the obvious graphical upgrade and the fact that you can drive in the water now. My opinion on it is pretty much unchanged, it's fine, but nothing too special. Then we go to N64 Toad's Turnpike, which is probably the most contentious of this cup. I know some people who despise it, and some people who really like it. And to me personally, it's fine. It's nothing great, but nothing terrible in my opinion, and dodging traffic is always pretty fun. The glider cars are a cool addition as well, and you can use them pretty strategically in this course. I also know some people who hate the anti-gravity strips on the side, but personally, I never use them, so I couldn't care less. This course is just kinda alright to me. I never pick it, but I don't hate playing on it. So all in all, it's kind of the inverse of what we've been seeing, where there's one course I really like, one course I really don't like, and two courses that I couldn't care less about. It's pretty okay, but still the third worst in this game for a reason. Number 50, Mario Kart 64's Flower Cup. This is the first 64 Cup that we've seen in a while, and it's a fairly mixed one. Starting with Toad's Turnpike, which I actually really like here. I think that the cars make for a compelling obstacle, and it can feel really fun to weave between them. I think which version of this course you prefer mainly depends on whether you like it with less or more cars, and while I can understand why someone wouldn't like an excessive amount, I think it makes for a really fun track. The item boxes being in little pit stops on the side is a great touch too, and I wish they carried that over to the remake. Then we get to Frat Bay Snowland, which I don't really care for. This section with all the snowmen is more annoying than fun, the boundaries of the off-road are super unclear, and the tunnel section is the most boring thing you could put here. I guess the music is pretty, but that's really all that this course has going for it. Then there's Choco Mountain, and while I do prefer the Booster Course remake by a reasonable margin, I still think that this original is pretty alright. I think the only thing that really holds it back in my opinion is the huge lack of obstacles until the boulder section. If the layout was more interesting, then this might have been made up for, but there's not all that much going on in that department either. Still, when you get to the boulder section, the track gets pretty fun. My favorite part is that if you fall off this one turn, you get sent all the way back to the beginning of the section. I just think that's really funny. I wish they carried that over. Then we get to Mario Raceway, and yeah, there's not really much to say about it that I didn't say already. I guess it feels a little more exciting to play here with how this game's drifting works, but aside from that, my opinion on the original is pretty much the exact same as my opinion on the Wii version, which is that it is okay. Yet another split cup of which we'll be seeing a lot soon. Number 49, Mario Kart Wii Banana Cup. The Wii Banana Cup is yet another mixed one where I find half the tracks to be kinda lame and the other half to be pretty good. We start off with N64 Sherbet Land, not to be confused with Sherbet Land, which I already talked about, and it's pretty much unchanged here aside from the graphical update. It still is one of the tracks of all time. And we have GBA Shy Guy Beach, which is okay, I guess, but I feel like it stands out in a bad way compared to some of the other retro tracks. Like, other games at least try and hide the fact that the track that they're using is from an older game, but this track is still pretty flat, and there's not really many compelling things about it aside from the comically large cannonballs that give a practically nuclear explosion if you hit one, which can be kinda annoying in the middle of a race. It's sorta fine, I guess, and I don't think the fact that it's flat automatically equals it being bad, but it's just not really one that I ever really revisit in this game. However, after this we get to the good stuff, because next is DS Delfino Square. This track is just really pleasant. There's a multitude of different paths you can take, including the split path at the beginning, and the shortcut down an alleyway, and I love tracks that do that. It really adds to the immersion of this being a town that you just happen to be racing through, and everything else about the atmosphere adds to that too. It just feels really cozy in a way many Mario Kart tracks don't, and I always appreciate it for that. Plus there's the really cool drawbridge with speed boosts on it, and that's always a blast to use. Then we get to GCN Waluigi. Why did I put Waluigi? Then we get to GCN Waluigi Stadium, which I also love. It feels significantly better to play here since it's in a game with an actual trick system. And they added half pipes on the sides of the track at this one part that feel so natural that it's hard to believe that they haven't always been there. The tricks all feel really fun to pull off, and the fire rings and bars are super fun to jump through and dodge. This one's still a certified classic, and I'll always love playing on it. All in all, another fairly split cup, but at least we're getting to some cups where the good at least weighs out the bad a little bit. Number 48, the Booster Course passes Lucky Cat Cup. The Lucky Cat Cup is very funny to talk about for me because it has what are, in my opinion, two of the worst tracks in the game, and also two tracks that I find really cool. This cup just can't really pick a side, and that admittedly does drag it down a little bit just because of its lack of consistency. Also, I should mention that this is the first of 5 cups from 8 Deluxe that coincidentally ended up right in a row on the list, which I didn't intend to happen, but these cups are all just so similar in quality that it just ended up that way. So buckle up for a lot of 8 Deluxe discussion. Anyway, this cup starts off with Tour Tokyo Blur, and while I haven't made my obligatory 96 track ranking yet, I still feel like I can say that this is one of, if not the worst Tour City in this game, and I don't even think that's a hot take to say. It's so boring, and the majority of the track is just road, aside from a couple tiny bits of off-road, and this glider section at the end. Other than that, there's barely anything going on aside from a couple thwomps in the second lap, and actually I'm pretty sure that's it. Those are the only hazards in this track. This game's Mario Circuit has more hazards and better obstacles than a course based off of the literal place that the game devs live. That's embarrassing. At least the music is pretty good. However, we then get to Shroom Ridge, a course that I really love. It's basically the textbook definition of a traffic course done right, by adding some off-road and shortcuts that are cool and compelling, but never distracting from the gimmick of the track itself, which are, of course, the cars. You can never really go wrong with a course with lots of cars as long as your layout is interesting enough to complement it. Take notes on 64 Toads Turnpike. And this course's turns are super fun to do. Plus the cars themselves are super fun to dodge, and on top of that the music is really fun and bouncy too. I'm never opposed to playing this track, and I always have a great time on it. However, then we get to GBA Sky Garden. Now I will concede with the majority here to say that this track isn't horrible to drive on. That being said, it's still not really that fun either. The bouncy mushroom is kind of fun, and so is the glider section, and the clouds are okay to off-road on, but that's really all that this course has going for it. The shortcuts on this track don't really interest me at all, and don't even hold a fraction of a candle to what we had before. Speaking of which, I was wondering how long it would take me to mention how badly they messed this course up as a remake, which it turns out is not very long because, yeah, what the fuck, Nintendo? This is not the same layout, and these are not the same shortcuts. This is not the same color palette, and this is not the same track. And I would have been forgiving of this if the course itself needed improving, but it really didn't. The original track was about as perfect as you could get for a 2D Mario track, and the DS remake was even better. You know why? Because they updated it to feel good to play on the DS, but didn't change the skeleton of the track. Unlike in this track, where it's completely changed and not for the better. Just an upsetting track that I never elect to play on under any circumstances. However, we then end off with Ninja Hideaway, one of the coolest and most complex layouts for a track in the entire series. I'll admit the Wave 1 visuals do drag it down a little bit, but other than that I'm struggling to think of anything wrong with this track. It's really dynamic and I never really feel like I take the same path twice in a race. This shortcut feels particularly strategic, because if you want to take it you have to be on the bottom path where you risk getting hit by more obstacles, but if you try and jump down from the higher path you risk slowing down. And when you factor that into the fact that you have a chance of losing your item before then, that already makes for one of the most dynamic shortcuts in this whole series, as well as this one glider here. In pretty much every other track, you want to take the glider if given the option, but here it really depends on your strategy, and that adds so much to this track. That's the thing about it, everything works in tandem with everything else. It all feels very intentional and skillful, in a way that lots of other tracks aren't. It makes for one of the most exciting tracks to revisit in the entire Booster Course Pass. On top of that, the music slaps, easily one of my favorites in the entire BCP. Honestly, this whole cup is one of my favorites if we're talking about just the music. Gameplay-wise though, yeah, it's really mixed. Two of my favorites and two of my absolute least favorites. The lack of consistency as well as the fact that I hate Tokyo Blur in this version of Sky Garden as much as I do really drag this cup down, but my love for Shroom Ridge and Ninja Hideaway keeps it out of the bowels of the very bottom of the list at least. Number 47, the Booster Course Pass Moon Cup. The Moon Cup is another one that's very mixed. The consistency is a smidge better than the Lucky Cat Cup, which is why this one gets to rank just a teeny bit higher, but the cups are around pretty much the same exact level of quality. We start off with Tor Berlin Byways, which I don't really care for that much. It's another case of a basic Tor city, and while this doesn't quite hit the same level of shit that Tokyo Blur does, it's still pretty bland. I've always found the Womps and the Berlin Wall to be pretty funny, and the cars are fun to dodge in the minuscule amount of time that we get to see them, but otherwise there is really nothing about this track that stands out to me. It's pretty boring. However, we then get to DS Peach Gardens, which I've always had a bit of a soft spot for, and it's updated really nicely here. Not only are the graphics significantly updated, and not only is everything that I loved about the track still intact, including the hedge maze section that I've always loved, and not only are the chain chomps still really fun to dodge, and probably the best implementation of chain chomps in the entire series, aside from when they were an item in Double Dash, not only do you get to drive backwards through the track on the third lap, which is so unbelievably cool and something I wish more tracks would implement, but this is the only course in the entire Mario Kart franchise where you get to high-five Luigi, Certified Hood Classic. However, we then get to Merry Mountain, which is meh. It nails the holiday aesthetic, and this path with the train tracks is kinda neat, but a large section of the second half of the track is just empty with nothing to do, no interesting obstacles aside from some speed boost, not even that much compelling off-road. Up until you get to the downhill descent, this middle section is just a bland way to come down from all of the Christmassy fun you were having before, and aside from one or two little boosts you might get, is just a boring slog. It's actually a lot like January now that I come to think about it. The section doesn't ruin the whole track, but it drags my enjoyment of it from a low B to a high C. If they had just added one more cool thing here, this could have been a fairly good track, but as it stands, it's just kinda meh. However, then we get to the standout of the cup, and the whole BCP if we're being completely honest, 3DS Rainbow Road. One of the best tracks from the already stellar lineup that Mario Kart 7 had, and one of the coolest tracks in the whole series. It's just got everything. It's got the perfect mix between being difficult, yet still spectacular enough to make you want to keep revisiting it. and there's really no way to describe how much of a masterpiece it is without just stating what happens in the track. I mean, you drive past Neptune and Jupiter, you drive on the rings of Saturn, you get to fly over and on the moon, and the ending bit is honestly one of my favorite bits of any course. Trying to stay on these long speed boosts and then going through this psychedelic tunnel that rivals the likes of Waluigi Pinball, and then trying to catch a glider ramp so that you can soar past these ramps and through the speed rings, and then trying to grab an item because all of it culminates in this one final long hairpin turn where there are no items, making it a mad dash to the finish line. It's just so endlessly charming, fun, and so damn majestic. And it helps that aside from some slight graphical changes and the removal of the sound effect when you go over the speed panels, boo, as well as some anti-gravity sections, it's pretty much unchanged from its original version. It feels even better to play thanks to the game's physics. I'm gonna fuck. Aside from the game's thanks to the game's physics. I can't say it like that. Thanks to the game's physics. It's just amazing, and it's the kind of track that you really have to see for yourself. So all in all, 2 lame courses, 1 really great course, and 1 absolute masterpiece. 3DS Rainbow Road admittedly really carries this cup, and is the other big reason that this goes above the Lookie Cat Cup. But Peach Gardens is amazing in its own right, and holds its own in this cup. Merry Mountain has parts that I really enjoy, and Berlin Byways could certainly be worse, so I think this placement is fair. Number 46, the Mario Kart 8 Mushroom Cup. The Mushroom Cup in Mario Kart 8 is also pretty funny to talk about, because it's one of the only cups I can think of where the entire cup stays consistently pretty mid throughout the whole thing. I'm serious, I have different opinions on each of the tracks, and I like some of them more than others, but the entire cup is C tier in my opinion. Starting off with Mario Kart Stadium, and as starter tracks go, this is one of the better ones. It does a very good job showing off the glider, and the first time you use the anti-gravity and see everything turning around you is unforgettable. As a tutorial, it does what it sets out to do absolutely perfectly, but on repeat playthroughs, it's one of the more basic tracks in the game, and I don't ever find myself wanting to play it again that much compared to other tracks in this game. Then we have Water Park, which is meant to serve as kind of the underwater tutorial of this game, and again, while it succeeds at that, it's just kind of boring otherwise, which is a real bummer for a course with this cool of a theme. The shortcut through the underwater ride can be fun, and bonking your head on the Ferris wheel is always funny, but other than that, this course is another one that I never really want to play. Then comes Sweet Sweet Canyon, which has a very nice theme, and a lot of the treats look very appealing, even though some of it does look kind of gross, like whatever this yellowish water is supposed to be. I just think that the track design itself is on the weaker side. And while it does a good job at introducing the split path gimmick that lots of courses in this game have, it doesn't really do anything that interesting on either path. I personally use the pink path because the turns feel more natural, but it doesn't really matter to me which one you use, they both feel the same. And other than that, the track layout is fine, but nothing all that special. Then we get to Thwomp Ruins, and while it's definitely my favorite of the cup, it's still nothing really to write home about. Track design can actually be quite intricate at some points, like the spinny wheel that can come down and knock down the glider path in the third lap, and the shortcut off to the side near the end, but it's still a Mushroom Cup course and it definitely feels like it. I don't mind playing on it, but I also can't be bothered to remember or care about its existence most of the time. And that wraps up the most middle-of-the-road cup in the whole series. It's fine. Moving on. Number 45, the Mario Kart 8 Flower Cup. Alright, back to the split cups again. The Flower Cup is a little bit better in its consistency, but still not great overall, and while the highs aren't as high as something like Ninja Hideaway or 3DS Rainbow Road, the lows thankfully aren't as low as Skyguard or Tokyo Blur. We start with Mario Circuit, which is okay in this game. It's not the best track ever, but it's fine to race on, and I don't hate it or anything. It stands as a pretty good introduction to this cup, and as Mario Circuits go, it's one of the better ones. The visual of the castle flipping upside down has always been pretty cool to me, and the obstacles can be fun sometimes, but all in all, I never really play this one unless someone picks it online. However, we then go to Toad Harbor, which I've always really liked. There's plenty of split paths to take depending on how you want to play. The downhill descent at the end feels exhilarating, and the trolleys make for pretty great obstacles. I can't help it, if you put a large moving vehicle on the track as an obstacle, I'm bound to love it. The trolleys also make this turn feel far more treacherous, and trying to perfectly thread the needle and take the shortest turn possible always feels great to do. I just love this track, and I always have a pleasant time playing it. However, then we go to Twisted Mansion. Fuck Twisted Mansion, all my homies hate Twisted Mansion. For starters, I've never really found the theme of a haunted mansion to be an automatic sell for me. It can be cool if done right, but I'm not going to be impressed with the track just because it's a spooky ghost house. However, ironically, if the whole track was the ghost house, then I'd actually enjoy it a significant amount more. The start of the track is awesome, with the doors slowly creaking open and the wavy split path section by the dining room. Plus the shortcut through the library is neat, but then we go to this underwater section, and it takes up most of the track. I've never really understood this, and it's made worse by the fact that there's nothing down here except a worthless split path. No obstacles, no trick opportunities, absolutely nothing. It's just bland and boring, and by the time you get out, the track is basically over aside from one more fly through the mansion and these hammer obstacles that are cool in concept but rarely ever do anything in practice. It's just all over the place, and it's really hard for me to have a good time on this track. But then we go to Shy Guy Falls, which I enjoy personally, but have never found it to be a massive standout like it is for many people. I mean, it's cool, no doubt, and driving up and down the waterfall is a really neat set piece. It can be fun to try and chain together as many boosts here as possible. The glider section with the split path is also kind of fun, and the shortcut at the end is one of the more satisfying ones to pull off. But other than that, this track doesn't really have much going on. The cool set piece of the waterfall is enough to keep me coming back, and it's a good track no doubt, just not one that I often remember. So all in all, kind of messy as a cup, but still a bit of a step up quality-wise. Number 44, the Mario Kart 8 Propeller Cup. The Propeller Cup is alright. I don't really have a lot to say about these middle-of-the-road cups, because while I do have them ranked higher just because they have better consistency, there's a real lack of big standouts in a lot of them like we had before. We start off with Sydney Sprint. This one seems to have its fans, but I am unfortunately not among them. The music is great and all, and the ramp section is kinda neat, but there's a big lack of cool set pieces, and because of that it's really hard to remember anything about this track aside from the aforementioned ramp section and the Opera House, which you're in for like 10 seconds total. Aside from that, it's yet another tour track that mainly just consists of road and not much else. It's boring, and I don't really get what everyone else sees in it, though if someone in the comments could tell me why they like this track, I would like to hear a genuine take on the actual layout of this course, because I don't really hear people talking about anything outside of the music as much, even though this is one of the more praised tour tracks. We then go to GBA Snowland, which is pretty good, I suppose. The shortcut at the beginning always feels pretty great to pull off, and the off-road at the end is cool, plus the penguins make for some fun obstacles on this ice section. It's a little too short in my opinion, not really leaving much to talk about because of how little there is here, but what is there is pretty fun and it makes for a fairly pleasant track. It's also nice that the screen shaking is gone, but that doesn't really change too much for me personally. I mean, it definitely does make it way more fun to play now, but I'm just saying that my opinion on the track design is about the same, if not a little more positive now. Then we go to Wee Mushroom Gorge, which is still a blast and definitely the standout of the cup. The mushrooms do feel kind of flat, which I think is just because of 8's engine, but it doesn't detract my enjoyment too much, and you can even trick when you leave the green mushrooms now. Plus they re-added the shortcut off to the side at the beginning, and there's a glider mushroom in this cave section which got added in 7, which does add some nice choice and variety in the cave section. I love this track and I always have. And then we get to Sky High Sundae, a track that many people seem to really hate, and I can see why. I mean, the whole track is just an oval, and it's really obsessed with adding in as many desperate anti-grav boosts and tricks as possible, to the point where it feels a little desperate. That being said, I really enjoy it. I don't know, I just love a track like this where you can experiment a lot with your speed and try and chain together as many boosts as possible. It just feels super satisfying to me, and it honestly feels like a spiritual, if less pure, successor to Excite Bike Arena. Tour's plasticky visuals also work surprisingly well here and makes the whole track a treat to look at, pun not intended. The music also slaps and is honestly one of my favorite music remixes from Tour. I just really like this track, and I know it can be divisive, but I for one always have a pretty good time on it. I'm the one annoying person that keeps choosing this track online. It's my fault. I sincerely apologize to everyone who's ever played with me. All in all, a more consistent cup than usual, but still a lack of anything incredible. Mushroom Gorge is the closest we've got here, and that's a great course, but not a masterpiece in my opinion. Anyway, we got through the 5.8 Deluxe Cups I talked about, so we get to take a short break from 8 for a minute. Number 43, the Mario Kart DS Leaf Cup. The Mario Kart DS Leaf Cup is another pretty mid one that doesn't really have any standout tracks, but also doesn't have any that I think of as total stinkers. The closest I could say that there is to that cup is the first track in this cup, SNES Koopa Beach 2. Look guys, it's my favorite game again! Yeah, in terms of retros from Super Mario Kart, I guess this isn't the worst, but it's still not very fun, and these puddles are especially annoying to avoid now. And that's pretty much all the substance of the track, at least the music is still kinda good. Then we go to Choco Mountain, which is still alright. My opinion on it is pretty much the same as it was for the N64 version, except here it's arguably a little worse since the boulders are way easier to dodge here, and this section of the track isn't as easy to troll people on anymore because it's way harder to fall off now. But aside from that, it's still fine. Then we have GBA Luigi Circuit, which I'm pretty neutral on. The turns are kinda fun and so are the puddles, but there's not really much to this one, and I don't often think about it when I think about my favorite GBA tracks. This remake doesn't really change anything aside from the graphics, but that at least means that it's not butchered in any way. It's just okay. Then there's GCN Mushroom Bridge, which is probably my favorite of the cup, but I still don't really like it too much. Thankfully, it's not quite as neutered as some of its brothers, but they did remove the bridge shortcut and pretty much all of the unique cars, so it lost quite a bit of charm. Layout-wise, it could have been done worse, and all in all, it's still a solid time. The entire cup is just consistently fine throughout, with no big stinkers, but nothing that really stands out about it. Number 42, the Mario Kart Wii Leaf Cup. If I have to talk about any more retro cups from Mario Kart Wii, I'm going to bite someone. Anyway, 2 mid-Leaf Cups in a row, wow. The Mario Kart Wii Leaf Cup is pretty okay. It starts off with Desert Hills, which I don't really care for in this game. It doesn't really fit Wii's engine all that well, and the layout is a mix of being pretty annoying or pretty forgettable. The Mario 3 aesthetic is cute, but I don't really care for this one, and if you're trying to get first place on this cup and, like me, you're kinda ass at this game, this can get pretty tedious to play over and over again. At least mushrooming through the sand is pretty fun. Then there's GBA Bowser Castle 3, which is pretty enjoyable in this game. There's lots of fun trick opportunities, and unlike a track like Shy Guy Beach or Mario Circuit 3, it doesn't really feel out of place in this game. Plus, I feel like the track's aesthetic carries over pretty well here, adding a stormy skybox that fits this track pretty well. I like this one, and it's consistently a pretty fun one to race through. My only real complaint is that I don't really like the update to the music that much. I don't know, it just doesn't feel nearly as good to listen to, and the lead instruments all sound strangely out of tune. However, that's kinda expected since Nintendo didn't really get good with updating the music for retro tracks until 8. Then there's DK Jungle Parkway, and while this version is fine, I'm gonna be honest, I prefer the N64 version. I don't know, something about that way the game controlled made it much more fun and thrilling to play in that game, but here it just doesn't feel that great to play. For example, the big jump doesn't feel nearly as novel here, especially since you don't really have any control over where you land. And the shortcut at the very end is much lamer now. It just feels like a lot of the unique elements of this track got watered down, and as a result, while I still like it, it's not nearly as much of a standout as it was in its base game. And then there's GCN Mario Circuit, and it's pretty okay here. I don't really have any major problems with it, but also when I think about my favorite Wii tracks, or even my favorite Wii remakes, it does not come to mind at all. I like that you can trick off the bumps at the end, and it makes for a pretty hectic finish, but other than that, this is pretty much just the same old track. I like how it controls a little better here compared to Double Dash, but other than that, I don't really have anything to say about this that I won't say later when I cover the base GCN Mario Circuit. This cup is another one that's just kinda consistently fine throughout. My least favorite track of the cup isn't one that I hate a lot, nor is my favorite track one that I consistently want to come back to, so a middle-of-the-road placement seems fair. Number 41, the Mario Kart Double Dash Star Cup. Here we have our very first GameCube cup, surprisingly late into the list. This game's cups are just fairly solid overall, but one of them had to take the bottom spot, and I think I have to give it to the Star Cup. The crazy thing is, this cup would rank significantly higher if it weren't for one thing. My old nemesis, Sherbetland. Not to be confused with Sherbetland. I hate this track, and it's the only one from Double Dash that I can really say that about. Dry Dry Desert might be kinda boring, but at least it doesn't actively infuriate me to play. This track is just really slippery, and combined with the already rough handling in Double Dash, that alone makes this track miserable to play. There's a cave section that's just kinda whatever to me. I think I might actually prefer the cave in the N64 Sherbetland. Imagine that. Most of the track is pretty much barren, so you have nothing to do but reckon with the shitty controls. That is, until you get to the Freezy section, which, no joke, might be the worst set piece from any 3D Mario game. If you bump a single Freezy in this section, you can pretty much just start over because you'll never catch up. You're turned into a solid block of ice for what feels like an eternity, and by the time you thaw, pretty much everybody has already passed you. The only thing saving this one is the skating Shy Guys, because they're kinda cute, I guess. Otherwise, this is really, really bad, and easily the worst course in all of Double Dash. It's doing the opposite of carrying this cup, it's dropping this cup and breaking it all over the floor. Anyway, thankfully the next 3 courses are pretty good. Next is Mushroom City, which is a solid traffic course. The nighttime aesthetic really helps this track stand out and feel so much more cool. And there's plenty of routes that you can take in the beginning which really add to the immersion, making this feel like an actual city and less like a race course. This one alleyway shortcut feels great to take. It's surprisingly difficult and treacherous, especially with the physics of this game, and the music is one of the better songs in this game. The only part I don't really like is this little bridge thingy at the very end, just because it's super easy to get blindsided by a car here, or a truck or a bomb car if you're particularly unlucky, and that can be pretty tough to come back from. I guess it's possible to dodge cars in this section, but it's extremely difficult and you could easily send yourself careening. Also, the controls of Double Dash kind of bring this course down a tiny bit because it can be super tricky to dodge the cars at some parts, and while that's usually fun, it can be a little frustrating sometimes. All in all though, this course is enjoyable, and I honestly really want to see it return in Mario Kart 9, because if this gets the Moonview Highway treatment, then music-wise and track-wise we would be in for a real treat. At least one or two of the 4 tracks that haven't returned yet from Double Dash are pretty much guaranteed to be in the next game, and out of all of them, I'm most excited to see what they would do with this one in a modern game. Then we get to Yoshi Circuit, which I really like here. This version definitely has the most charm to it out of all of the iterations of this track, with all of the shortcuts, including the tunnel, one of the coolest shortcuts from any game in the series, being perfectly intact here. Plus look at that, it's the Yoshi Copter in all of its glory. You love to see it. Aside from that, the turns on this course are pretty fun, and it's got one of the better layouts from this game. It's aged really well, and this version doesn't feel any worse to play than either of its remakes. Just a solid course, I can see why it's a classic. Then we get to the best course in the cup by far, DK Mountain. This is another one that's gotten remade a couple of times, but I don't think either of its remakes quite capture the same magic that this one had. I still like every other iteration of this track, but this one just has something special about it, you know? Out of all the courses, this one fits Double Dash's controls the best out of pretty much all of them. It makes the trek down this mountain feel appropriately treacherous and bumpy, but never in an annoying way. These hairpin turns are also pretty fun, and pulling off the shortcut here is one of the most satisfying things to do in this game. And of course there's the bridge, I love this thing. You never feel like you're quite safe when you're on it, and that adds so much thrill to the last bit of this course, knowing that any moment a Bowser shell could come and decimate you. Leaving Big Bananas on here in the direct middle of the bridge is also a personal pastime of mine. The course is just a classic, and you can't go wrong with it. All in all, a fairly solid showing here, and the first cup that we've gotten to that I would genuinely call good, but my Sherbetland bias drags it down a lot, so sorry. Number 40, the Mario Kart 8 Acorn Cup. The Acorn Cup in Mario Kart 8 is yet another one that doesn't really have any bad courses. In fact, I like all the courses here to some degree. But what really holds it back is its lack of any major standout. We start with Rome Avanti, and, you know, it's fine. It doesn't really do anything groundbreaking like some of the city tracks we got before it. It's just kinda okay. The only real memorable sections are the 2 parts that take place in the Coliseum, which are both pretty enjoyable, and the section where you can see the other races coming towards you. Those are both pretty neat, but other than that, this track unfortunately doesn't offer much else. Next is DK Mountain, which I definitely still like, but 8's super smooth controls made this track not really age super well. It doesn't feel quite as treacherous as it did in its original version, and while the layout itself is still pretty fun, a lot of the difficulty luster is lost here. Plus, it doesn't really feel as climactic when it's the second course in a cup rather than the last one. Still, the good layout really bolsters this one, and you're even incentivized to take the shortcut in this hairpin section here with a little ramp. The bridge is also slightly modified to be like the bridge from Maple Tree Way, a change that I don't really mind too much. It's not really as memorable, but it can still be kinda tricky and can really mess you up at the last second. All in all, a track that I still like a fair amount, but some of the magic is definitely lost here. Then we have Daisy Circuit, which is definitely my favorite of the cup. First of all, I really just love the way that this track looks. I know a lot of people were mad because it's not as orange anymore, but I honestly don't really mind because this track is still very good aesthetically, with the statues looking especially amazing in this version. The whole track is just so pleasant, and the visuals, and especially the updated music, really bolster that. Other than that, I mean, yeah, the layout isn't anything too crazy, but I like it for what it is, especially this added glider here and the giant U-turn at the end. It suffers a little from being a simple circuit track, but I still love its presentation, and I still have a lot of fun racing on it. Those who know me and my opinions on the character Daisy may call me biased. Next we have Piranha Plant Cove. I think this track is pretty good. Probably the best underwater course in the series so far, aside from Dolphin Shoals, I guess. It's one of those tracks that doesn't really have one standout element that I can call its gimmick or best attribute. The whole track is consistently fun enough that I still think of it rather positively as a result. The only big memorable sections that I can really think of is the shortcut off to the side and the pretty good placement of these thwomps. These water geysers are also a pretty fun addition, but all in all, I think this track mainly just thrives off of having a more solid layout than most underwater courses. It feels pretty fun to drive on, and I don't often have a bad time on it, but I will admit that compared to everything else that Wave 6 had to offer, this was one of the more forgettable showings. And that's the Acorn Cup. Again, no particularly bad tracks, just no huge standouts, and while I like these versions of DK Mountain and Daisy Circuit, I don't enjoy them nearly as much as I did in the past, and they aren't enough to save this from getting anywhere higher than the top 40. Number 39, the Mario Kart 64 Mushroom Cup. The Mushroom Cup is the best cup that 64 has to offer, which is kinda sad to be honest. It peaked in its very first cup. However, I think this cup had a fairly solid showing overall. We start off with Luigi Raceway, and while it's not the craziest thing ever, I don't know, it's still kinda fun. I'm a lot more forgiving to circuit tracks in older games because they have a lot more value in a game with more difficult controls, and this course for a tutorial is pretty solid. There's nice long turns where you can practice your drifting, which is pretty nice since mini-turbos are a bit more difficult to build in these older games. There's a Jumbotron in the not bad tunnel section, and there's even a hot air balloon with a special item box that only drops blue shells. Not many tracks do something like this, and I think it's kinda neat. All in all, not the best track, but not the worst starter that you could have for your game. Next track in this cup is Moo Moo Farm. Yeah, this is pretty clearly the low point of the cup. I know I just praised Luigi's Raceway for its simplicity, but at least that course had fun turns to make up for its lack of obstacles. Here the road is so wide that this is easier than the first track of the game somehow. I like the moles, and that's literally all that this track has to offer. However, next we go to Koopa Troopa Beach, one of my favorite courses from this game. It's simple, but it still has enough obstacles with these ramps and crabs to keep it engaging and to make this track feel pretty fun to play on as a result. And this tunnel shortcut, coolest shortcut in the game. It feels so satisfying to pull off, and it's the coolest part about this track. I just really like it. It's not the craziest thing in the world, it's just pretty fun and pleasant. And then we go to another one of my favorites from this game, Calamari Desert. It's the train, guys! I love trains. The train is such a good gimmick, giving you a split-second decision wherever it shows up, forcing you to either stop and wait for it, or risk it all and try and speed past it. It's pretty intricate, and unless someone is doing some serious front-running, it can help keep everyone in the race together. Plus, pretty much the entire track has off-road opportunity, making it so that you can take some serious shortcuts if you get mushrooms or stars. I just love this track, and I firmly believe it's only gotten better with time. However, this version is still great, and I love playing on it. It just brings me so much joy to get stopped by a train in a racing game. I think that it's hilarious. All in all, not a terrible showing from Mario Kart 64 here, with 3 tracks that I really like, and also Moo Moo Farm is here. It's pretty good, and with that, Mario Kart 64 is officially out of the running in the ranking. I can see why this game holds a lot of nostalgia for a lot of people, and while I find a lot of the tracks to be very bland and basic, I still think this game is a blast with friends, and its importance to the series can't be understated. A solid little game all around. I can't really think of much more to say about it as a whole though, so let's move on, because it's going to be a while until we see another game eliminated. Number 38, the Super Circuit Mushroom Cup. Mario Kart Super Circuit making its first entrance surprisingly late into the list. Yeah, I never thought much of this game for the longest time, but replaying it for the video, I realized just how good many of the cups actually are. Obviously not all the tracks in the game are perfect, but they did a great job at arranging them so that the cups are still all fun to play. The worst out of all of these is definitely the Mushroom Cup, but it's still not bad by any means. Starting off with Peach Circuit, and yep, it's a circuit track. Not the worst starter that you could have, but it's still not too memorable. Still, the turns are decently fun, and it's not a bad track, it just doesn't do anything all that interesting, even by starter standards. The castle in the background looks really good, and the fruit trees are a nice bit of scenery, but other than that, there's really not much to talk about here. Then there's Shy Guy Beach, and while I don't really care for it in Wii, I do enjoy the original version. It just fits this game better, and the scenery just fits better in 2D, especially the pirate ship sprite. The music is also quite nice, and one of my favorites from this game. Again though, there isn't really too much to talk about here. Then we get to Riverside Park. This is yet another one where there's not too much discussion to be had regarding the track itself. The turns are fun, and I like the big loop that leads up to a big jump at the very end, but I don't know, there's just not really much to a lot of these early game GBA tracks. Next comes the first of 4 Bowser Castles in this game, and these are all fairly solid. Part of the reason why a lot of these cups rank so high is because all of them end with one of these, which are all pretty consistent in quality. This one is admittedly one of the more basic ones though. There's thwomps to dodge, a couple jumps, and not much else really. It's a good introduction to this game's Bowser's Castles though, and a good enough closer to this cup. All in all, this cup doesn't really have any bad tracks, just no great ones either, but it's still fun enough to play. Number 37, the Mario Kart DS Star Cup. We're back to the split cups again, but thankfully this one isn't quite as drastic as some of the others. Starting off this cup, we have DK Pass, and yep, that's DK Pass. Basically just Baby's first DK track. Donkey Kong does have some of the most thrilling tracks in the series later on, and it makes this feel like it doesn't fit his vibe at all. As for the track itself, yeah, it's DK Pass. The snowballs can be kind of fun to dodge sometimes, and the snowmen are, in fact, an obstacle on the track, but other than that, there's just pretty much just nothing to this one. I did hear that there's an item box off to the side at one point that gifts only stars or something. I don't know if that's only in the 7 version though, or if it's in this version too, but I don't really care enough about this track to check, to be honest. Next, however, we get a huge ramp up in quality with Tick-Tock Clock. This is one of the coolest tracks in DS, and one of the most fun layouts in the entire series. It goes all in with the theme, with tons of moving parts, a giant pendulum to dodge, and this awesome section at the end with 2 spinning gears where if you pick the correct one, you can get a massive speed boost, but if you pick the wrong one, you get slowed down significantly. It honestly feels like kind of a prelude to the escalators on Coconut Mall. Plus there's also this section with gears that you actually get to drive on the face of, one of the neatest set pieces in the whole game. It's just a blast. The only complaint that I have is that the presentation is a little dull, but the graphics are meant to replicate the Mario 64 level, and they did a pretty good job from what I can tell. Otherwise, this is an absolute banger, and I'm so glad that it got the glow up it deserved in Mario Kart 8. We'll get to that much later. Then we go to Mario Circuit. I mean, yeah, it's a generic circuit track. At least the fire-spitting piranha plants are cool, and the music isn't half bad either. As circuit tracks go, I guess it's one of the better ones, but it's still really nothing to write home about. Why did this need to be in the Star Cup again? However, then we go to Airship Fortress, the absolute goat of this game. Taking a Mario Bros. 3 airship type aesthetic, this is some of the most fun and dynamic obstacles in a game already filled with tracks with such dynamic obstacles. The opening section alone elevates this track to an all-time classic, having you drive and eventually try and drift against the bonsai bill shots coming towards you. Then you have to navigate through this tight area where rocky wrenches will try and mess up your lines, navigate past these crates, dodge fire bars that are moving across the ceiling. Immediately afterwards, you get shot out of a cannon into a castle where you take one of the longest turns in the game, after which you have to go to this broken piece of ground, and that's a wrap on one of the coolest tracks in the whole series. I love it, and I really hope it returns in Mario Kart 9. All in all, we have 2 tracks that are kind of just okay dragging the cup down, but then we have 2 of the best tracks in the game to bolster this cup out of the bottom lower half. Number 36, the Mario Kart 8 Turnip Cup. The Turnip Cup is a really strange one to discuss, but I'll go over the tracks first as usual before I get into why. Starting off, we have Tour New York Minute, which isn't a terrible tour track, but aside from the music, it doesn't really do anything to stand out in my mind. I mean, you get to drive through Central Park, that's kind of neat, I guess. You also get to drive through the Rockefeller parking garage. The track also looks fairly nice, I guess, especially in Times Square with all of the billboards and city lights. Again, it's not awful, but I'm really struggling to think of things to say about it, and it feels like you could have done so much more with a New York-themed track. It's fine, I guess. Then we get to... Listen, I've heard the fans of this track talk about how, sure, it's not the most complex thing ever, and it's not that graphically impressive, and it has no significant updates from the Wii version, and the music is barely updated whatsoever, but it's still pretty fun to race on. And to that I say, fair point, random straw man that I made up in my head, but I raise you one simple fact, which is that you're playing Mario Kart 8 Deluxe. You're gonna have fun no matter what, because the engine of the game is fun. This is one of the worst tracks in the whole game in the fact that it sticks out like a sore thumb compared to every other track in this game, and in the fact that there have been no updates to it whatsoever in a game that's otherwise the undisputed king of taking previous tracks and reimagining them for a modern era. Do I still have fun on it occasionally? Sure, but that doesn't make this a good track. It just means that this is a well-designed engine. The track didn't do anything. If I baked you the most hideous, abhorrent, disgusting pie ever, but I served it to you and it still looked like a decent pie, you wouldn't say, well sure, this pie isn't great, but at least it still feels like a pie. No, you would go, this is really gross, please get out of my house. It's the same here. Just because the track doesn't feel terrible to play on doesn't suddenly mean it deserves flowers, just because the physics and mechanics of the game are good. It still sucks and doesn't do anything interesting, and I hate it. Stop picking it online, please. That said, if you still like it, then more power to you, I just can't understand you. Then we get to Calamari Desert. Oh my god, the train is here, I love this cup, I changed my mind. Not only do we get the already great train mechanic from the original, with some extra gliders to boot, but now you get to drive on the train tracks on the third lap, which is such a cool addition that really changes the entire strategy of this track. If you're going around and you haven't seen the train yet, then you really have to be on your toes, especially in this tunnel. Plus when you see some people get bullets or stars and then just toss the entire train in the air, that's one of the craziest things in this whole game. I love this track, and somehow they made me love it even more than the already incredible N64 version. And then if that isn't enough, we get Waluigi Pinball, which, come on, what is there to say about Waluigi Pinball that hasn't been said a billion times already by everyone who has ever played Mario Kart? It's basically as perfect as Mario Kart gets, combining an insane concept with a stellar atmosphere, tight turns, fun mechanics, an absolutely bumping music track, unique sound effects only available on this course, and the pinball table section, which might be the most intense yet most thrilling and adrenaline-pumping section of any track ever. It's so incredible, and I love it just as much as everyone else, except those of you chuckle fucks that keep calling it overrated. Putting Calamari Desert and the Waluigi Pinball back-to-back is honestly one of the most incredible things that they could have ever done in this whole game, and it's just a shame that they had to ruin it with Mario Circuit 3 and, to a lesser extent, New York Minute. It's really you have to eat your vegetables before you can have dessert type of cup. It made this cup pretty difficult to rank, and after much consideration, I eventually just decided on somewhere in the middle. If Mario Circuit 3 wasn't here, it might be a different story, but what are you gonna do? Number 35, the Mario Kart 8 Triforce Cup. The Triforce Cup kinda qualifies as a split cup, but its consistency is much better than what we've been seeing. Starting off with Wii Wario's Gold Mine, which, while not as good here, is still pretty good and fun to play on. My only huge complaint with this version is that the mine carts are non-hazardous, because that turns what was once a pretty unique and fun obstacle into just another speed boost, but this isn't terrible. The layout is still fun, and I've still quite enjoyed playing on it. I just missed some of the difficulty luster that the original had. Still, that original is so good that even without it being as difficult here, I still consistently have a really good time on it. Then we get to SNES Rainbow Road, and I'm not sure if this is a hot take or not, but personally, this is quickly becoming one of my favorite tracks in the whole game. The original is a good skeleton to work off of, and this remake does a fantastic job with it, making the entire track look so vibrant and colorful, making just the right amount of change without ruining what made the original so special, and just overall striking the perfect balance between difficulty and enjoyability. The thwomps also shoot out shockwaves on the track that you can trick on, and they're actually fun to trick on here, unlike the 7 version. It is on the simpler side compared to many of the other tracks in this game, but honestly, I don't really mind that, because the layout is just so fun that it makes this a great track to pick up at any time and have a great time on. I've always loved it, but it's slowly but surely starting to climb up there as one of the best in my opinion. I always have an amazing time on it, and I can't wait to play it again and again. That said though, why would you put your Rainbow Road in the middle of the cup? That doesn't make any sense. Then we get to Ice Ice Outpost. This track has a fairly mixed reception as far as I can tell, with some people really liking it and considering it underrated, and others hating its guts. And every time I play this track, I'm just left with one question, that being, what does he even do? Like legit, I don't see how anybody has any strong feelings on this track whatsoever, because my opinion on it is emptier than pretty much any track in the whole series. The 2-track gimmick is there, and that's pretty much all that this track has. I mean, that there are some cool skill-based shortcuts off to the side sometimes. At least the music is good. Otherwise, I mean, again, it's one of the most nothing tracks in the whole series. I practically can't have an opinion on it. Shout out to my buddy Connor, though. I think this is his favorite track or something. And then we get to Hyrule Circuit, which I'm sorta mixed on, and a quick disclaimer immediately, I'm not really much of a Zelda fan. That's not to say that I don't like it, it's just I haven't really played most of the games. In fact, the only ones that I've played as of writing this are the original on the NES, Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom, and I haven't beaten any of them yet. I'm really bad at playing video games, guys. So I can't really speak to how well this game represents Zelda as a franchise, but from an outsider's perspective, I mean, it seems to do a pretty good job. The coin sounds and item roulette sounds are changed to sound like Zelda sound effects. The piranha plants and bats are replaced with Dekubabas and Keefs, and the puzzle in the castle that you have to solve to open up this ramp is one of the coolest mechanics in the game. Especially because depending on your vehicle, it can be really hard to hit all of the boosts yourself, so you sometimes have to rely on the players behind you to finish it, which can be kind of nerve-wracking if you don't know whether to go for the ramp and trust the people behind you, or play it safe and just go around. It's really smart as a mechanic, and I really like it, but the rest of the track is a little bit boring. To be fair, it is a circuit, so they couldn't go too crazy with the layout, but come on man, surely you could have picked a more unique concept than Field at Day. In terms of layout, it's not the worst, but certainly not anything to write home about outside of the castle section. And overall, it's a track I like, but can't say much else really. All in all, sort of a mixed cup, but we're definitely starting to see the quality start to improve significantly here. Number 34, the Mario Kart 8 Leaf Cup. The Mario Kart 8 Leaf Cup has fairly good consistency, but is held back a little by the fact that my opinion on some of the tracks has soured a little over time. Not enough to make me say that I dislike any of these tracks, but certainly enough to the point where this cup doesn't quite crack the top half of the list. Starting with Wario Stadium, which I really liked for a while, but recently it's just felt kinda stale to me. I don't know, I don't often find myself picking it online compared to other tracks, and even if it's the best choice available, often I'll just pick random. It's still good, but it's held back by not really having any standout elements to me. All the trick opportunities are kinda neat, and the new anti-grav turn and underwater section are kinda neat, but there's not really one specific element of this track that keeps me coming back like there is for many other courses in this game. I like it, but it doesn't go much further than that for me, unfortunately. Then we get to the end is never 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 the end. Admittedly, I don't dislike this version of Sherbet Land as much as the Double Dash version, which is mainly because this game controls way better, making the freezy section manageable, and even if you do hit one, at least you don't turn into a solid block of ice for an eternity. Plus, if you want, you don't even have to do the freezy section in this version, since they added underwater sections where you can just ignore the ice rink sections entirely, which is a welcome addition for sure. There's also a hidden glider ramp that's kinda cool, but all in all, the best version of a terrible track is still not great. A lot of my problems with it are fixed, but that really just leaves something that no longer infuriates me and kinda just bores me instead, considering I didn't like the aesthetic or most of the layout all that much before. Even the music is kinda forgettable if I'm being perfectly frank. It's just one of those tracks where I don't think I'll ever really like it that much, no matter what they do with it. However, then we get to Music Park, which is carrying this cup hard. I love this course so much, and it has, one after the other, some of the coolest set pieces I've ever seen in a Mario Kart course. Immediately after the track starts, you drive on a piano, and then past some dancing piranha plants where you have to avoid their spotlights if you don't want to get bit. And then you drive on a glockenspiel and xylophone before bouncing on a drum instead of a mushroom, before you're launched into the section with bouncing music notes where you have to time your tricks to match their jumps, which match up with the beat of the music, kind of like that one Mario Wonder level. There's just always something going on. It's one of the coolest tracks in the series for that. On top of that, this version gave it a massive graphical update. The colors and textures just pop in this version, and they really added to the whole vibe of the course. It's just absolutely phenomenal. Then we go to Yoshi Valley. I mean, at least it controls better now, but then again, that kind of makes it so that you can just take the obvious fastest paths every single time with no consequences, meaning that there's virtually no incentive to take any other path except for these two. I still like the course, but the fact that the main gimmick is practically non-existent in this version really hurts it because aside from that, this course doesn't really have much to its name. It's decently fun still, but also not a standout. And if you're disappointed in this opinion, don't worry, I'm disappointed too. I used to soy out over this track back in the days where I didn't really care what the fastest path is and just took the big cannon because it looked cool even though it actively puts you behind in the race. Good times. And now I honestly haven't taken that path for like half a year at the time of writing this. Anyway, this cup is pretty good, but Music Park carries it pretty hard, and while Wario Stadium and Yoshi Valley are still fairly enjoyable, and Sherbet Land isn't as bad, it's still not quite enough to bring this cup higher than this. Number 33, the Super Circuit Star Cup. The Star Cup in Super Circuit kinda qualifies as a split cup, but I think that the split here is much less drastic than the cups that came before it. The cup starts off with Snowland, which lots of people seem to really hate in this game, and me personally, I just think it's okay. Yeah, it sucks that the screen shakes the whole time. If I had to wager a guess as to why, it's probably a glitch with the falling snow or the background or something. But I feel like everyone makes a little too big a deal out of it. It is annoying, but absolutely not the worst thing in the world, and it doesn't ruin the track for me. However, everything else about the track is just sorta okay in my opinion. The layout isn't anything too special, but there are some neat little cuts you can do if you're skilled enough. It's far from the worst thing in the world, but also not really a standout in this cup. I appreciate it for what it is though, even if the screen shake is pretty annoying. Then we get to Ribbon Road, and while this version now has the unfortunate burden of living in its remake's shadow, I do still get a lot of enjoyment from the original version. It's one of the courses in this game where there's plenty of big jumps, and they're easier than ever to absolutely abuse in this track especially. And even if you just use them normally, they're still super fun, and the rest of the track has a good layout too. It's one of those tracks where its layout just benefits a lot from being in an older game, because this course feels custom made for this engine more than many other tracks in this game, and this and Rainbow Road can be some of the most fun tracks in this game to just experiment on, and figure out what exactly you can do with these massive jumps. The 8 Deluxe remake made some updates to the layout that made it feel much more suited to that engine, and that on top of the graphical update and attention to detail of that version make me prefer it slightly more, but this version is still up there as one of my favorite 2D Mario Kart tracks. And then we get to Yoshi Desert. Yeah, this is definitely the weakest of this cup, and one of the weakest in this game. It at least looks fine. I think that the yellows look good and the sprite work isn't terrible, Yoshi Sphinx my beloved, but good lord, this track is so boring. There's pretty much nothing interesting going on layout-wise, and the aesthetic, while again not terrible, doesn't really save it at all. Fortunately though, this cup at least finishes strong with Bowser Castle 3, a course I really enjoy. Not only does this one have a much more unique aesthetic than the others before it in this game, taking place outside the castle and having a blue and purple color palette, but the turns in this one all feel quite perilous. This is the point in the game where you start getting actively punished if you haven't nailed the game's drifting system yet. And while some people may find that annoying, I mean, I certainly did when I played this game for the first time, now that I've bothered to get slightly more decent at this game, I can definitely appreciate how precarious a track like this is. Plus the thwomps are very well utilized here, and you can see Kamek flying around, which they didn't keep in the Wii remake. Boo, Wii stands, your goat is washed. A pretty solid cup all around. Number 32, the Mario Kart 8 Golden Dash Cup. The Golden Dash Cup is a pretty solid showing all around, with one obvious exception that does drag it down quite a bit. We start off with Paris Promenade, and as city tracks go, this is one of the better ones that we've seen. It does have a bit of Wave 1 ugliness, but I think that the layout of the track is pretty fun, and while it doesn't have the craziest third lap gimmick in the world, it's still pretty neat to get to drive backwards on the track. Plus I like the split path here right before the Eiffel Tower, where you can choose between taking a faster path but not getting an extra item, or taking a potentially slower path but getting extra defense. I think that's a pretty simple but smart gimmick to add here. The music is also really good and definitely does feel French. There's not much else to say about this track, it's just pretty good, and while later city tracks would improve upon the formula, I think that this is a good starting place. Then we get to Toad Circuit. This is easily one of the worst tracks in the whole Booster Course Pass, and I'm pretty sure you already know that. It's just such a lame inclusion that it's honestly kind of hilarious, and somehow they managed to take one of the most basic Nitro tracks from 7 and make it worse in every way. Visually, it looks extremely bland and untextured, and layout-wise, nothing has really changed, but I didn't even really care for the layout of the original much, and it feels arguably worse to play in this engine. At least I could excuse it in the original because it was, you know, the first track of the game, but I can't give it that same excuse here. Those elements aside, I mean, it's Toad Circuit, what do you want from me? There's pretty much nothing new to talk about here, aside from the insane fact that it got included over every single other course from 7 that hasn't come back yet, since any of them would have made for a more interesting remake than this bullshit. However, we then step up in quality with Choco Mountain, and this is by far my favorite version of this track. It just feels so much better to play now, and this cave section makes it feel far less samey visually. It still does have a little bit of the Wave 1 ugliness, and they fenced off the part where you were able to fall backwards on the track before. I do understand why they did it, since it would probably be way too unfair for this game, but I don't know, I think it would have been funny. However, everything else about this track is pretty solid, and the bumps at the end that you can now trick on make for a way more exciting finish. That on top of the improved music and layout makes this pretty easily the definitive version of this track in my opinion. Then we get to Coconut Mall, and honestly I still love this track. I know that many people say that it took a huge dive in quality here, and I miss the escalators as much as the next person, plus the butchering of the parking lot still isn't forgiven, but I don't know, it's still Coconut Mall, the layout's still fun as ever, and it feels pretty much the same to play in my opinion. I still really enjoy it here, and this is one of the few cases in the early Booster Course Pass where I think the simpler design actually works. It makes the colors in this version pop so much more than they ever have, and everything looking more smooth and artificial actually works in this track's favor in my opinion, since you are in a shopping mall. It's still easily the standout of this cup for me, and I love it just as much as ever. Well, almost as much as ever. I'm still mad about the parking lot. All in all, this cup shows a big ramp up in quality as we enter the top half of this list. Number 31, the Mario Kart Double Dash Mushroom Cup. The Double Dash Mushroom Cup is one of the better mushroom cups in the series, and is probably my favorite one, with one exception that we'll get to in a while. Most of the tracks in this cup are just pretty good in general, and I always have a pretty good time playing this cup. Starting off with Luigi Circuit, one of the best starter tracks to any game in the series. The gimmick of being able to see the other races coming at you from the other direction is just so clever and gives this track such a unique feel that you can't really get from any other track in this game. On top of that, the rest of the track is pretty fun as well, and it serves as a great introduction to how wacky this game's tracks, controls, and items can be. It doesn't do anything too crazy aside from the backwards driving gimmick, but it is a pretty darn good gimmick, and it makes the track stand out in my mind. Next we get to Peach Beach, which is pretty good here. I feel like that's my general opinion on most beach tracks in the series. There's a lot of charm to this version, and it makes it a lot more interesting to play in Double Dash's engine than in Wii's with the more slippery kart physics. In fact, those physics add quite a bit to pretty much all of the tracks in this game, aside from Sherbet Land, where it makes it actively annoying to play. The cataquacks can be pretty fun obstacles. The little pipe that you can go in to get an extra item is very charming, and there's also the giant pink rock, which kinda looks like a penis. I bet I'm the first person to point that out, and you've probably never heard that joke in your life before. I've also heard rumors around that Mario 2 is actually based off of Doki Doki Panic. Next we get to the original version of Baby Park, and I absolutely love this version. It fits this game's slippery controls and massive OP items perfectly, and it makes this track so chaotic to play on, plus the middle section is completely flat, making it so that items can pass through to the other side of the track. If someone throws a Bowser shell, they can basically just start an apocalypse on this track. I've never had a race on here that wasn't an absolute blast. I'm very much a spreader of the Baby Park agenda, and I will not stop until you love it too. And then next is Dry Dry Desert, which many people seem to agree is the worst track in this game. Obviously, I don't quite agree, but it's still not great. This version at least has some charming elements with the Piranha Plant and the quicksand, and the giant tornado moving around the track, but it can still feel kinda boring to play on sometimes, and the aesthetic isn't great either. Plus, if you took those two elements out, then this track would just be really boring. See Dry Dry Desert from Mario Kart 8. I don't personally hate it, and can occasionally even have fun with it, but I understand why others dislike it as much as they do. A solid cup all around. We're definitely starting to get to cups where the low points are becoming less and less significant. Entering the top 30, we have number 30, Mario Kart Wii's Lightning Cup. Yeah, I don't think it's a surprise to anyone that the 4 worst cups in Wii are the Retro Cups. I think the Nitro Cups in this game are all super solid, and the Retro Cups are all just kind of bland and forgettable, aside from this one, which I actually think is pretty good. Aside from one track that single-handedly drags it down. Can you guess which one it is? Yeah, I've pretty much said all that I have to say about Mario Circuit 3. It's the same as ever in this game, keeping up this track's legacy of never being updated ever. I have nothing new to offer on it that I didn't already say about the original and the 8 version. It's bad and it sucks, and I hope it finally dies after the next game. It's basically the only reason this cup couldn't rank higher. Though, if it did get brought back from Mario Kart 9, I would laugh out loud. That would be very funny. Next we have Peach Gardens, which, again, I have quite the soft spot for. Back when I was a dumb little kid who didn't even know what Mario Kart DS was, I still loved this track a lot, and it fit right at home with most of Wii's selection. The huge standout here is the Hedge Maze, which, while good in 8, did feel scaled down a little bit. Here it's super fun and feels just as intricate as something like the pinball table in Waluigi Pinball, where you kind of have to plan out your route ahead of time to make sure that you don't get hit by the chain chomps. It's a huge standout as a set piece, and the rest of the track feels nice to play as well. There's another section here with a smaller hedge circle that was removed in 8 in favor of a piranha plant, and while that was a fine change, I just like the hedges better. They feel more thematic, and they feel like a more unique and intricate obstacle. It's just an all-around pleasant course, and it's always been a standout in my mind. Then there's DK Mountain, and yeah, this one's still a classic. I suppose I like the Double Dash version just a little bit better, mainly because I feel like the wacky controls and items suited this course just a tad bit better than Wii's. But Wii still low-key controls like ass if you use motion controls, which I have done most of my life, unfortunately. So this course still has always felt appropriately treacherous to play. Aside from that, it's pretty much the same great course as ever, with some bonus half-pipes added in for good measure. I still love it just as much, and it's another retro pick that fits right at home with Wii's Nitro selection. Then there's N64 Bowser Castle, and my opinions on it are unfortunately pretty much the same, but I do like this version a bit better since I think it fits Wii's control scheme well, and doesn't feel quite as annoying to play. And the graphics are enhanced too. I mean, you get to see Morty in glorious HD, so it has to be peak. Other than that though, yeah, my thoughts on it are pretty much the same. It's alright, but I think I probably just need more practice with it until I can truthfully say it's a track that I have fun on. All in all, Wii's Lightning Cup is pretty solid, and a fairly good ending to this game's retro selection. Mario Circuit 3 does drag it down a lot, unfortunately, which is why it couldn't be higher, but it's still good enough to crack the top 30 despite that, which just goes to show how strong some of the other courses in this cup are. Number 29, the Mario Kart 8 Special Cup. The Special Cup tends to be one of the better varieties of cup in the series from what I can see on this list. I mean, the fact that this is the third worst one yet it made it all the way up here, just really goes to show how strong these cups really are. We start off with Cloud Top Cruise, and as cup starters go, this one is phenomenal. This takes what Sky Garden did so well at, and goes an entirely different direction with it, and I mean, since we don't have a good Sky Garden remake in this game, this is pretty much the next best thing. You drive on a green road made of vines, bounce on whatever these things are, I actually never figured that out, drive on puffy white clouds, go through an airship, get shot out of a cannon, and you go to the coolest section of any Nitro track in this game where you can drive through a gray thundercloud as an electric guitar rendition of the song you just heard plays. And you have to time which speed boost you drive on correctly before they get struck by lightning. This section is incredible, and it feels super satisfying to chain all the boosts together. And it's bolstered by the fact that the rest of this track's layout is pretty awesome too. The only thing holding it back, in my opinion, is the fact that aside from this ending section, you don't really get to spend much time in any of the other sections. They're all cool, but when you play the track itself, it all kind of feels like a blur. That wouldn't necessarily be that big of a problem. I mean, 3DS Rainbow Road does something similar, and that's one of the best tracks in the series. But the difference is that that track just had more memorable sections in my opinion, whereas with here the track sections are all distinct, but none of them feel as cool to the point where they stick out in my mind in a big way, aside from the Lightning Cloud section. I know that sounds like a lot of complaining, but really this is just me trying to rack my brain to find anything that I dislike about this track, because it's insanely good and should stand right alongside tracks like Mount Wario and Electrodrome as crowning achievements of this game. And thankfully it seems like it's getting more recognition as of lately, which I'm very happy about because this track absolutely deserves it. Then we get to fucking Bone Dry Dunes. This course sucks. The visuals are fine, and that's really all the course has going for it. It's just so boring. None of the split paths are memorable except for the anti-grav path that's way faster, meaning there's no reason to do anything except take that path. The music is pretty unmemorable, something at least most of the other desert courses managed to get right, except for like Desert Hills, I guess. And the cave section feels really bland and uninspired. The dry bones as obstacles are kinda neat, and mushrooming through the sand at this last part can be fun, but I never want to replay this track, and I groan every time it gets picked. It's pretty much the only reason this cup couldn't have ranked higher. However, we then get to Bowser's Castle, and out of all of the Bowser Castle levels, this one is probably honestly my second favorite, aside from the obvious best choice, which we will get to. Wii's might give it a run for its money, but they're practically tied in my opinion. This one just has so much going for it. The absolutely awesome aesthetic, all of the fire bars and spike balls that you have to dodge, the giant Bowser statue used in probably the coolest way we've seen so far, having it literally punch the track. and the absolutely phenomenal music that's honestly one of my top 5 songs from this game. It's so good, and it boosts this track for me a lot. The metal style of the song with the electric guitar player absolutely going off the entire time, combined with the entire big band playing the melody, is just really good, and it fits this track perfectly. I just love this track for everything it does. Not only does it succeed at having a really compelling track hazards that are always so fun to dodge, and a solid layout, but it just goes all out on the atmosphere, and I really appreciate it for that. Absolutely the standout of this cup, and one of the best nitros in this whole game. It's also funny how this game only has 2 Bowser Castle levels, and they just so happen to be the 2 best ones of all time. This game knew where its priorities were at. Then we get to 8's Rainbow Road, which seems to be rather contentious in the community. Some people like it, some people hate it. For me personally, I think it's alright. I think the main problem people have with this is that for a Rainbow Road, it's a little unmemorable, and it doesn't have one standout thing about it like the others do. It's not as much of a spectacle as 7's Rainbow Road, not as difficult as Wii's, not as groundbreaking as DS's, not as atmospheric as Double Dash's, not as exciting as Super Circuits, not as classic as SNES's, and N64's is way worse actually. Other than that though, it doesn't really look favorable when you compare it to any of its older brothers except N64, and I feel like people sleep on it because of that. But as a track on its own, I mean, it's good. I think people are way too harsh on it just because it's not quite as memorable as most Rainbow Roads, but taken at face value, it can be super fun to jump between the tracks, trick on the ramps on the conveyors, and take some of the surprisingly sharp turns. It's a decent track, and while I will agree that it is outshined by its contemporaries, I still think it deserves some credit for what it does right. So all in all, a really solid cup, all things considered. Bone Dry Dunes drags it down quite a bit, obviously, but other than that, this cup had a phenomenal showing. From one special cup to another, we have number 28, Super Circuits Special Cup. This is another GBA cup that's just solid, not really having any significant low points. My least favorite track of this cup still isn't bad enough to drag down the entire experience from hitting the upper echelon of this list. Before we get to that though, let's start off with the first track of this cup, Lakeside Park. This is a pretty solid course, all things considered. It doesn't really do anything too crazy or stand out, but it has a bunch of small elements that add up to it being a pretty strong track. First and foremost, this thrusts you straight into how difficult this special cup is going to be, having some of the tightest turns we've seen so far, and even having a few turns that will send you back in the race significantly if you miss them. Some people may find this annoying, but for me personally, I think it makes a great yet brutal test of skill. Even though I could rarely get past these turns without using a save state, I still honestly wish more tracks did this, because not only does it make tracks like this significantly more intense to play on, but I think it's also just really funny to slightly bump someone and then see them get sent all the way back to 8th place. I think the fact that this is a cup opener makes that element stronger too, since if those turns do cost you the race, you're still on the first track, so it's not like you lose a ton of progress. There's also a big jump which are always fun to utilize, unique volcanic rocks, and one of, if not my absolute favorite music track in this game. I honestly can't wait to see this track get remade in the future, just so that we can get a full big bandified remix of the song, because it's a banger. All in all, this really adds up to a challenging and really fun chorus. It's not my absolute favorite in this game, but still a great opener. Then we get to Broken Pier, which I'm a little bit mixed on. On the one hand, the aesthetic is really nothing to write home about. Aside from Luigi's Mansion and the new Boo Lake, I've always just found regular Ghost levels to be kind of bland aesthetically in Mario Kart, and it's no different here. The music track is fine, but never really got the chance to shine until it was remade in 8 Deluxe. And aside from that, there's really nothing about this track that makes me want to come back to it in terms of just the aesthetics. The layout is pretty okay though, and there are some pretty neat shortcuts to take. And I always like the gimmick in the 2D games of the blocks falling off the sides as you hit them, but there isn't too much to be said with this one. Not an awful track, just a pretty forgettable one. Then we get to Bowser Castle 4, which honestly might be my favorite 2D Bowser Castle level. Not only is it appropriately treacherous for a Special Cup track, but it taking place in a power plant gives it such a unique vibe. There's a section with lava holes that you need to avoid, and these ones don't even have jumps, making it far more dangerous if you careen off course. Another section with islands to jump between, similar to SNES Bowser Castle 3, and the turns are all appropriately sharp and difficult while not feeling too unfair, with some pretty good thwomp placements to boot. Just a very good, solid Bowser Castle that makes for a great penultimate challenge. I mean, it's the only Bowser Castle in this game to have a big jump, that's how you know it's peak. Then we get to what's probably my favorite of the cup, and the most slept-on Rainbow Road of the series. I love this track for one simple reason, the bounce panels on the sides of the track. Not only does it make for a unique obstacle, making it even more risky to go towards the edges of the track, but you can also utilize them to take some insane shortcuts, giving this track a ton of replay value. Learning the most optimal way to use these bounce panels makes this track such a treat to come back to. And don't even get me started on the world records on this track, because Jesus Christ, people aren't even touching the track half of the time. That gimmick alone is enough to make this track deserving as going down as a cult classic, and the rest of the layout is pretty good to boot. Appropriately sharp turns, stars that fall onto the track, a long boost pad at the end that's pretty tricky to stay on, but super rewarding if you do, and a phenomenal aesthetic. It's just a ton of fun, and I love it quite a bit. So that's 2 tracks I like, 1 track I love, and 1 track that's just kinda okay. Still, I'm glad that we're moving away from the cups that have significant low points dragging them down, and the highs are getting much higher. Number 27, the Mario Kart 8 Crossing Cup. The Crossing Cup shows a pretty big step up in quality, since I think this is the first cup on this list to have no stinkers. The worst course in this cup is still pretty solid, and the best course in this cup, well, let's just talk about it right now. This version of Baby Park is an absolute blast, and it's honestly my favorite iteration of this track across the series. The original was great, and it fit the GCN's frantic items and controls perfectly, but this version, even though it's missing the massive items, still modernizes this track in all the right ways to the point where it generates even more excitement from me whenever I get to play it. The entire track is anti-gravity now, meaning bumping into other racers will give you a speed boost, which is a genius addition to this course, since the entire appeal is that you're going to be bumping into other racers no matter where you are in the race. Now that you go faster every single time that happens, it really adds to the chaos of this course. Plus, it got a massive overhaul visually, and it just looks so vibrant and fun now, with a background that's far more fleshed out. It makes Baby Park feel like a real place. A huge graphical overhaul to the track itself, and flashing borders on the sides. And the music remix is just the cherry on top. It's chaos incarnate, and the fact that it gets faster every single lap makes this course 10 times more maddening to play on, in a good way, of course. And while the items aren't as insane here as they were in Double Dash, they're still good enough to keep this track feeling chaotic and making it so that lapping other racers is still risky, since you might bump into someone with a star or a bullet, which is helped by the fact that it's pretty much impossible to break away on this course because, you know, it's an oval. And if you play this with custom items, or frantic items, or 200cc, it can easily become the most insane experience in this entire game. I love this version of this track so much, it's genuinely one of the best tracks in this game in my opinion. Then we get to Cheeseland, and while this track is pretty divisive among fans, I think it's pretty decent, and it's definitely been growing on me over time. Not one of the best tracks in this game in my opinion, and I still like the original better, but I still really enjoy racing on this one. I think the biggest thing holding it back is its aesthetic. If they set this track in space like the original, or even just at night, and made the cheese more yellow instead of plain and stale looking, I feel like it looked much better, and I'd enjoy the track way more as a result, because I can't lie, in broad daylight, this course looks kinda rough, and the terrain barely resembles cheese at all. However, this isn't too big a problem, since the layout of the track is super fun. There's holes everywhere to trick off of, some fun turns and chain chomps, and my favorite part, the shortcuts. These are some of the best shortcuts in the whole game, and gives a lot of comeback potential on this course. Also, this track got what might be one of the best musical upgrades out of any retro course for some reason. The original's music was good, but this version is phenomenal, and the live instruments really bolster this one. Again, kinda held back by how ho-hum the aesthetic is now, and I do miss the rasp from before, but it's still a solid course, all things considered. Then we get to Wild Woods, a course that I really slept on for a while, but coming back to it recently, it's honestly fantastic. The aesthetic is one of the prettiest in this entire game, and the gimmick that you're racing through a giant tree is so creative and fun. I mean, you start the course on the side of a tree before flying through a village of Shy Guys, and you get to rush down a water slide and land in a lake with some lily pads, before taking an upward jump back onto the side of the tree again, which is honestly one of the sickest uses of anti-grav in this game. It's a damn adventure of a course, and there's nothing quite like it in this game. Then we get to the namesake of this cup, that being Animal Crossing, and this is a pretty pleasant course. It's not my favorite crossover in this game, but it's nice, and I like all the neat little touches like the mole being replaced with Mr. Rossetti, the items being floated up with balloons, the coins being replaced with bells, and the best part about this course, the 4 seasonal variants, each with different obstacles and music tracks to fit each of them, which is a super cool gimmick. The layout isn't anything too special, and it's not the most engaging track in the world, but all the little Easter eggs do make it feel pretty cozy and nice to play on. A really solid cup all around. The only reason it couldn't rank higher is because the competition is starting to get pretty stiff, and also some of the cups we'll get to later just have higher highs. Number 26, the Super Circuit Flower Cup. The Super Circuit Flower Cup was one that I figured would rank lower for me at first glance, but when I actually played through the tracks, this one shot up and became my second favorite in this game. It is largely carried by one track, but the other 3 tracks are solid enough that they aren't dead weight. Starting with this game's Mario Circuit, and while this isn't the most exciting track in the world, it does have some value in this game. I like it about as much as I like its remaster that I talked about earlier, but I think in this game it fits in better since my standards for this game aren't as high as my standards for 8. And in the game without any insane gimmicks, I think layout and vibes are more important than ever. And while this track's aesthetic is pretty simple, mainly just consisting of grass and trees, the layout does make up for it by having some pretty fun turns, making it a pretty decent start to this cup. Then we get to Boo Lake, and a lot of my feelings for Broken Pier do carry over to this one, though I do like this one a fair bit more. Something about the aesthetic of this one is just so much more pleasant on the eyes rather than being bland and boring like Broken Pier, with the more purple color palette and haunted house in the background. so that earns it some points. Plus all the jumps and invisible bridges make this one feel way more exciting to play. The boos with candles are also a nice aesthetical touch, though I'm not really sure if they actually do anything. Again, not the craziest thing ever, but it's really fun to try and pull off the shortcuts, and the layout is fairly good. I enjoy it, and I'm glad it got the glow up it deserved in 8 Deluxe. Then we get to the standout of this cup, that being Cheeseland. This version of Cheeseland is one of the most aesthetically pleasing and creative tracks in the whole series, taking place on the moon made of cheese. Something about the yellows combined with the dark starry skybox makes this track such a treat to look at. Take my opinion on anything yellow with a grain of salt though, since I am the type of person who actually enjoys and uses Peach's Gold Alt in Smash. And this track's layout is one of the most fun in this game, having a bunch of U-turns and 2 big turns one after the other, which is always a treat. And that's not even mentioning the unique rats that serve as obstacles on the track, which is just so cute and fun. Honestly, if you combine the unique obstacles and aesthetic of this course with the layout of the 8 version and made some sharper turns here and there, you'd have a pretty much perfect track. This version is still definitely up there for me as one of the best in this game though, and it brings up this cup quite a bit. Ending this cup we have Bowser Castle 2, and like the other GBA Bowser Castles, it's pretty solid. This one in particular doesn't have anything too terribly notable about it, and I think it's weaker than 3 and 4, but the turns are still fun, and this one has plenty of jumps and a couple thwomps to dodge. Again, it's nothing too crazy, but it's still quite good, and I do enjoy playing it, and I feel like it serves as a good medium difficulty Bowser Castle to end this cup off with. A solid cup all things considered. All 4 courses are good to varying degrees, and while Cheeseland carries the cup quite a bit, the others aren't dead weight. Ironically, next on the list we have the very next Flower Cup in the series, that being number 25, Mario Kart Double Dash's Flower Cup. This cup is another one with no real stinkers, showing up how much we've stepped up in quality. Even the worst course here is still very enjoyable, and the other 3 are some of the most iconic in the game. Starting off with Mushroom Bridge, which is a ton of fun in this game. Some of the problems I mentioned with Mushroom City do still apply here, but not to as bad as a degree since the turns on this course are a little more forgiving, making it so that the cars are easier to maneuver around. I still think Mushroom City wins aesthetic-wise, but I think this one feels much smoother to play on to the point where I'm not really sure which one I like better. Judging the track on its own merits though, its layout is pretty fun. This shortcut is always pretty fun to pull off, the mushroom cars can be utilized to great extent, and the Wiggler buses are really cool obstacles. And then there's the real star of the show, that being the bridge itself. Not only does it provide a great spot for a hectic mad dash to the finish line as you try and weave around all the cars and hit the people in front of you, but there's also boost ramps on the side of the bridge that you can use to either jump off and gain some extra speed, or ride all the way to the end of the bridge with. It's not the most helpful thing shortcut-wise, but it's incredibly satisfying to pull off, and it's really charming, so I don't care. Just a really solid course, I enjoy it a lot. Then we have this game's Mario Circuit, and while it's definitely the weakest of this cup, it's still not too bad. The turns are solid, this chain chomp is pretty well placed, and you can even take a massive shortcut if you mushroom behind him, which is always pretty fun to pull off, and I guess the bumps in the road are cool, and the ending part with the bridge jump and the piranha plants is kinda cool. Yeah, there's not too many standout elements to this one, but there's nothing actively annoying about it, so it doesn't actively drag down the cup, especially considering that the other 2 courses that come after it are phenomenal. Daisy Cruiser is iconic, and for good reason. It's just such a pleasant course, and it serves well as this game's why the hell are they driving here course. 8 had an airport, 7 had a shipwreck, Wii had a shopping mall, DS had a pinball machine, and Double Dash has a cruise ship. It goes really all in with the theme too, having a swimming pool that you have to avoid, a dining room with sliding tables that you have to dodge, a secret underground area that gives you an extra double item, life rafts that you can use to hit the people behind you, and just a really great atmosphere. Also, shout out to this article that I stumbled across online that was meant to detail shortcuts and Easter eggs in this game, because one of them was to knock someone down into that underground area, where they will be completely bewildered and drive around in circles for a while before figuring out how to escape. This strategy has not yet worked for me because the people that I play games with are over the age of 5, but I will let you know if I can ever successfully pull off this expert strategy. I really love this one, and while it does now live in the shadow of some better remakes that it got later on, it's still very fun. Finally, we end off with the best course in this cup, that being Waluigi Stadium. This course has just consistently gotten better and better with each iteration, which is saying a lot because the original is still really great. All of the jumps are still just as fun to pull off here, which is impressive for a game without a trick system, and I especially love this middle section with the fire bars and piranha plants since it's so hectic and fun to dodge. Plus the ending jump is extremely memorable. This is another case of a course sort of living in the shadow of some better remakes, but this original version was an amazing skeleton to work off of, and it's easily one of the best courses in Double Dash. A solid showing from this Flower Cup, having 2 great tracks, 1 good track, and 1 that I have no strong feelings on but still don't dislike. It definitely deserves its spot as the 2nd best cup in Double Dash. Number 24, the Mario Kart 8 Egg Cup. The Egg Cup is another great cup that's somewhat brought down by a course that I'm not crazy about. Starting off the cup we have Yoshi Circuit, which is pretty solid. The graphical overhaul helps this version stand out compared to the other two, fleshing out a lot of the background details and making this course feel a lot more lived in. Plus the music slaps here, it's genuinely one of the best upgrades the music track has gotten. The waterfall is back again and it's still just as fun as ever, and in general I think the layout fits 8 Deluxe's controls the best out of the 3 games this track has been in, making this really fun to pull off drifts on. I really enjoy it. Well, I guess that's the last time I'm going to end up talking about Yoshi Circuit in this whole video. I hope I didn't miss any important details about it. Next we have Excitebike Arena, which I really enjoy. It's a simple but charming reference to Excitebike on the NES, and it's unique from many other tracks in this game. It is, in fact, just
a long circle.
And while that might be a downside for some people, those people are incorrect. Pulling off trick after trick on these ramps is so satisfying, and pulling off a perfect lap on this course is a great feeling. Plus, a little bit, not all mind you, of the item chaos from Baby Park does come into play here, since because the track consists of 2 straightaways, it provides ample opportunities for lower placements to chuck items way further ahead of the pack than they normally would be able to. Oh, and the ramp placements are randomly generated too. This course is really cool. Yeah, it's obviously not the craziest idea in the world for a track, but I like it a lot, and I'll always be a defender of it. Then we get to Dragon Driftway, which drags down the cup a little bit, but not too much. The track looks great, and driving through Gobblegut is a neat reference, plus the Kung Fu Lakitu statue is awesome, but there's just not really anything going on with the track itself. Anti-grav is used a lot, but never in a unique or super standout way. The background just spins a bit. And there's barely any obstacles on the track aside from some slight off-road and a couple of shortcuts. The turns are fun, and it's certainly not a bad course at all, just one of the more unmemorable ones. Then we get to this cup's major standout, that being Mute City. They absolutely cooked with the F-Zero tracks in this game, and while this one is the weaker of the two in my opinion, it's still an absolute blast to drive on. I love chaining together boosts, trying to go as fast as possible, the coin pads are an amazing touch, and I especially love the visuals. I think this course has some of the strongest uses of an anti-grav visually in the entire game, such as this part where the track spirals in front of you, or this part where you can see racers coming towards you on the ceiling. And that ending section where you can take this shortcut if you have a boost item and then move downhill to make a mad dash to the finish, and just barely trying to squeak ahead of your opponents is one of the most memorable endings to any course. On top of that, the music is incredible. It's not quite as good as Big Blue's music, but still absolutely phenomenal. Just an amazing track, it alone brings this cup up and it makes it super enjoyable. But the others stand out on their own as good tracks too, aside from Dragon Driftway. We're definitely starting to see some truly great cups. Number 23, the booster course pass is Rock Cup. Rock Cup is another great cup filled with great courses that gets dragged down by one mid-course. I'm starting to see an ongoing theme here. And that track is actually this cup starter, so let's waste no time getting to the mid. London Loop is very, very boring and one of the most uninspired city tracks. I don't even know what to say about it because I mean, there's nothing to talk about. I guess the chomp off the chain is cute, and so is the drawbridge, but those are literally the only aspects of the track that I can remember off the top of my head, aside from Big Ben being in the background, and looking at footage of this track, I mean, yeah, I'm not that far off. That's pretty much all there is here. Other than that, got nothing, I'm sorry. This is pretty much just the textbook example of a mid-city consisting pretty much only of road and only having like 2 cool aspects about it. The good news is that this track has no defenders that I know of, so people won't get mad at me for not being detailed enough about it, which means we can move on to the actually great courses in this cup. Starting off with Boo Lake, and this has got to be one of my favorite aesthetical glow-ups out of any GBA course. It just looks so nice now, and the return of the titular lake is great to see. I love the part where you burst upwards out of the lake, and the dark and stormy skybox with the haunted mansion in the background is really eerie and nice. Plus the music remix is really good, and it fits this track super well. Layout-wise, it is pretty simple, and it's far from one of my favorites in this game, but it is still pretty good, and some of the turns can be pretty sharp and catch you off guard if you aren't careful. It's pretty solid, and I enjoy it quite a bit. And then we keep the momentum going with Rock Rock Mountain, which might honestly be my favorite of this cup. I am begging you all please to hop off my goat. People are so mean to this track, but I honestly really love it. Sure, I will concede that gliding did feel a bit, well, a lot better in Mario Kart 7's engine, but I honestly don't mind this game's gliding engine. I think it's still fun, and it keeps this track's main gimmick, the fact that you're in the air nearly the whole time, intact pretty well. Plus, this track has tons of shortcut potential, and getting speed items on this track is one of the most exciting things ever, since you can pretty much just take an entirely different path through this forest section. The other thing people clown on is the graphics, but honestly, I think it looks fine. It's certainly not the best at all by Wave 3 standards, but it still looks good, and the graphics have never really bothered me or had me go, wow, this is so much worse, like a track like Koopa Cape or Toad Circuit might. The uphill section with the rolling rocks is still rad as ever too, even with some added anti-grav boosts to make it even more fun to chain together some boosts. I still like this track, dammit, I just think it's neat. You guys need to leave my scrimbly wimbly alone. In all seriousness, I do understand where the hate comes from. It's just all the major points of contention I see people bring up are things that have never really bothered me personally. I can completely understand why it would bother someone else, but to me this is the same great track I've always loved. And then if that wasn't cool enough, we get to end off this track with Maple Treeway. I don't think I need to sell any of you on how good this track is, but for the sake of consistency, I'll try anyway. This is simply just the coziest Mario Kart track you'll ever play. The music, the relaxing orange color palette, the fall-time atmosphere, the enormous wigglers, it's all just made to make you feel as warm and comfy as possible. This version could be a little prettier. It does definitely still have a few of the Wave 3 symptoms, but it still looks great here. The theme is also really creative, taking place in a giant tree. I'll never forget the first time I played this track only to get shot out of a cannon into the orange leaves. It's just one of the most breathtaking moments of any course. The little leaf piles with little mushrooms and bananas in them are really cute, and the ending section with all the split paths you can take to get an item or shake other players off your tail is pretty memorable, as is the shortcut at the start. That said, I do have some gripes with this version in particular, just minor things. First off, I do like the inclusion of this half-pipe, but it does feel a little janky and slow, and it's only ever really useful in time trials if you need to max out your coin counter. Plus, even though I am the #1 Wiggler fan and love the inclusion of the Wigglers on top of the tree, I think they are way less compelling of an obstacle here. I liked them better in Wii, where they would stop right in your path to the point where you actually had to swerve around them. Here, they just kind of wander around randomly, and I think that's a little lame. Plus, even though I like the glider, I did enjoy the jack-off bridge a little more. I know that sounds like a lot of complaining, but honestly, these are just nitpicks. I love this course a lot, and I'm so glad it got another shot to come back in a more accessible game than Wii or 7. All in all, while London does drag this cup down, Boo Lake is solid, and the other two courses are ones that I have major soft spots for, so this cup still gets to rank pretty highly as a result. Number 22, the Mario Kart 8 Boomerang Cup. This cup is another great one. It's honestly surprising, since you'd think that the fact that this has 2 tour cities would bring it down, but they decided to go ahead and make up for it by including 2 of my favorite cities in the entire BCP. The first of those is Bangkok Rush. I'm not sure if this will be a hot take to say, but I actually really love this one. Its layout just appeals to me quite a bit. I love the section where you can trick on the boats, the marketplace section that gives me Shy Guy Bazaar vibes, all the alternate paths you can take up the staircases to avoid other racers, driving through Chinatown, getting to see the King Power building in the background, all the tiny corners you can cut, and of course the BMA parking garage, single best landmark from any tour course. You can't convince me otherwise. In all seriousness, it is nice that it basically just guarantees you a purple mini turbo, and the section right after it where you bounce on all the tents is super fun. The turns in this course all feel quite distinct. There's always something going on, and there aren't any major sections that consist of just road, and the ones that are feature pretty sharp turns to keep you from getting bored. LA, take notes. There's plenty of landmarks, but the track itself is still fun enough to the point where even if you don't notice all of them, you'll still enjoy yourself. Hell, I did. And on top of that, the song's a banger. It's grown on me a lot over time, and has quickly become one of my favorite songs in the BCP. I know many people consider this one of the more mid-tour courses, and I've just never quite been able to understand why, because I think it's great and easy to stand out among the cities. It's an absolute blast, and I hope more people will start to give it the credit it deserves. I feel like this course is the prime example of why you shouldn't treat every tour city besides Singapore as just the same old thing, as I've seen many Mario Kart fans do. It genuinely feels like people feel actively biased against tour and consider the cities to be in a category in and of themselves. The amount of times I've seen a ranking where the first time they mention a bad tour city, they say, "I'm not a big fan of most of the tour cities," when I think that's really unfair. I don't care for some of them, but I don't think they should be placed in a category that's classified as all being mid, and they should all be judged on their own merits, because I feel like I haven't seen anyone give reasoning as to why they don't like a course like this, aside from, "It's a tour city, so that means it's mid." When I think that really undersells how fun this track can be to drive on, and all the layout stuff that it does really well that I mentioned earlier. It deserves more credit, dang it. Dare I say it, this track is underrated. Also, shout out to the 2016 Tubi movie of the same name. Nintendo, you won't beat the plagiarism allegations today. I need to watch this movie, it looks hilarious. Anyway, coming off of that high, we get to the problem child of this cup, that being DS Mario Circuit. I don't hate this course, but it's another case of an otherwise incredible cup being single-handedly brought down by one mid-course. It's not bad, but it's just an average Mario Circuit. The fire-spitting piranha plants are cool, and the Wiggler representation is appreciated, and all the extra forest section they added is cool too, but at the end of the day, that's really all that's going on here, and other than that, this course is just really easy. Not to mention the Wave 2-ass graphics we have in a Wave that otherwise managed to have some pretty solid visuals. It's just the obvious outlier in this cup, and this is just a really unfortunate cup to have to get dragged down by just another Mario Circuit. However, this is the only course in this cup that's even remotely mediocre, as then we go to Waluigi Stadium. This is the best version of an already great course by a massive landslide. The graphics are insanely good, with the ground textures looking especially great. All of the compliments I already gave to the layout are still present, except now with a much better control system, and there's actual incentive to use the half-pipe since you can access secret paths with them. It's such a smart gimmick and single-handedly makes me enjoy using the half-pipes here so much more than any other course in this game. Plus the fire rings feel great to jump through, and the final one is super satisfying if you have a glider. The only critique I have with this version is that some of the piranhas are tilted upwards, making this section a lot less difficult. It'd make it less memorable if it weren't for the fact that the half-pipe gimmick is here, but the half-pipe kinda makes up for it, so I don't mind too much. Just an absolutely phenomenal remake on nearly every front. Even the music remix is great, taking this track in a whole new direction that I really dig, even swapping the melodies at the beginning of the song. And then we still keep that momentum going with Singapore Speedway. I know that it's a cold take at this point to call this my favorite city, but, I mean, come on, sometimes takes are popular for a good reason. This track is incredible. Not only is it the most visually distinct out of all of the tourist cities, with tons of colorful lights and an absolutely gorgeous cityscape in the background, but the layout here is extremely memorable. Having some of the most fun glider sections out of any track, one of the best uses of the cannon in the whole game, having the beat drop of the music switch right when you get shot out. Also, the music in this course is amazing, by the way, one of my favorite songs in the whole game. An entirely new remix for the Chinatown section that you're in for like 10 seconds. A similar gimmick to the F-Zero tracks in this game where there's tons of opportunities to speed yourself up while in the air and on the ground. And all around just a stellar atmosphere. Tracks like this, Bangkok Rush, and Athens Dash, which we'll get to, are the sole reason why I don't ever want to generalize the tour tracks or open up this video by saying, I'm not a fan of the city tracks. Because some of these are genuinely phenomenal and deserve to go down as classics just as much as other beloved courses in the series. And I'm sure this one will, because it's been getting amazing amounts of praise. Can't wait for the video essays in 2028 or something calling this track overrated. All in all, 2 phenomenal courses, 1 great course, and 1 that's just wholly mid. If DS Mario Circuit was swapped out in Wave 4 with something like, say, New Riverside Park or DK Summit, this cup could have easily shot up to the top 10 or maybe even the top 5, but as it stands, this is a great cup. Originally I had Rock Cup ranked above this, but I think after looking at the courses in each cup, this one ranks higher as a result because of winning consistency-wise. Number 21, the Mario Kart 7 Leaf Cup. Oh my god, this is the second worst cup in Mario Kart 7, and it still cracked number 21. I'm not beating the 7 Andy allegations today. But then again, can you really blame me? This game did one of the most solid jobs at arranging its cups in an appealing way out of any of the games in the series, and as a result, while I don't love every single track in this game, I do love nearly every cup, which is good because this doesn't have a versus mode for some reason. And this one is no exception, I mean, look where it placed. We start off with Calamari Desert, which I still love just as much as ever here. It's virtually the same as the 64 version I talked about way back in the day, except with a couple extra optional glider ramps and an overall much better engine. The train is here, still in full HD now, and come on, who doesn't love a good-looking train? Plus, there's a few extra ramps on the road to make the parts away from the train more exciting. The 8 remake still clears by a good margin, but that track had the misfortune of being in a cup with Mario Circuit 3, which this course does not. It doesn't have to share the spotlight with a single bad track. This is one of my least favorite tracks in this game. That being said, it's not awful by any means, just really, really boring, and it really breaks this cup up in a way that I'm not a fan of at all. It's pretty much the only reason that this cup couldn't rank higher. There's not many changes to this version, aside from the graphical update, and one glider section that feels really janky. Like, if you dare even try to cut this corner, you'll be sent into the abyss and Lakitu will have to come and pick you up. It's just not that fun or memorable at all, and is a pretty noticeable blight in this game's otherwise really solid retro selection. However, then we get to 2 absolute bangers back-to-back with Daisy Cruiser and Maple Treeway. Daisy Cruiser has some of the best updates of any course in this game, opening the split path back up at the beginning, to split up the players before immediately bringing them back together, making the pool non-hazardous so you can go for a swim and get more speed or stay on the outside and get more coins, and making the secret path down here underwater. Plus the track just looks much nicer now. It's crazy how many tracks from Double Dash have just consistently gotten only better and better with each game they appear in, except for Baby Park and Mushroom Bridge and Luigi Circuit, they don't count. Aside from that, I mean, it's still the same pleasant track as ever, with the only change I'm not a big fan of being the life rafts getting removed. I thought they were a fun gimmick in the original, so to see them gone is kinda sad, but it's not the end of the world, and I still think the rest of this track is great. As for Maple Treeway, I mean, I already talked about how great I think this track is 2 segments ago, but there are some aspects of this version that I do enjoy more than the 8 Deluxe version. Firstly, this track just looks way better here. The detail on the leaves just make the oranges and reds pop so much more, and this track is far more aesthetically pleasing as a result. Same with the texture of the tree itself. I don't know what it is, but I just like it way better here. The leaf piles having more varied items is also appreciated, and the wigglers are a much more compelling hazard. All of these things make me enjoy this version way more than the 8 Deluxe version, because aside from the Jackoff Bridge still being missing, I have pretty much no nitpicks with this version, and I think it's pretty much perfect. As a result, this cup gets to rank higher than the Rock Cup mainly because of the low point of this cup isn't as low as that cup. It bolsters a better version of Maple Treeway, and I enjoy Calamari Desert and Daisy Cruiser quite a bit. If this cup didn't have DK Pass dragging it down, it'd be pretty much perfect. As it stands now though, it just barely misses the top 20 and is my favorite Leaf Cup in the series. Which isn't saying much, but hey. Moving on to another Mario Kart 7 Cup and kicking off the top 20, we have the Shell Cup. This is easily the best Shell Cup in the series by far, and it's not even remotely close. This is so much better than its contemporaries that it's actually insane. We do start off with the low point of this cup, that being Luigi Raceway. It sure is faithful. I think they added these boost panels on the side, and that's literally the only new thing. Considering how stellar this game's retro selection is, it's honestly pretty hilarious that this is what kicks it off. Because it's not the worst, but it definitely sticks out like a sore thumb compared to the rest of this game's retros. However, the cool thing about this cup is that it only gets consistently better, and that's apparent with GBA Bowser Castle 1. Well, I don't appreciate the fact that Super Circuit got shafted so damn hard in this game. I mean, literally every other game got fan favorites added from it, even Super Mario Kart, but Super Circuit only got a measly one track, and it's a GBA Bowser Castle again. But this isn't a bad course at all. I thought that the original was pretty decent, and my opinion of this version is pretty much the same. There aren't really any significant changes to the layout aside from the graphics and one glider ramp, so there isn't really anything new to talk about here, but it's good. Moving on. Then we go to Mushroom Gorge, which is still just as great as ever. This version introduced this special blue mushroom that gives you a glider, which I think is smart in case you don't feel like bouncing. I usually prefer to bounce on the mushrooms, but I find myself taking the glider occasionally, and it's nice that the option is there. Other than that, I mean, yeah, it's the same standout course that it was in the original. Again, the mushrooms are a little flat here, and they did remove a shortcut that the Wii and 8 Deluxe versions both have, which is a little disappointing. But I still love this course, and if it gets added to a game, I'm pretty much guaranteed to enjoy it. And then we end off with Luigi's Mansion, and this is definitely the best version of this track. The graphical update really just makes this course look way better than it ever has. The inside of the mansion has moving boos in the painting, which is just a really cool touch, and I love how detailed the interior of the building is. Plus the garden section is much more fun to navigate now with the added glider ramps and the improved controls. I love this version of this course, and I'm glad that this track got the glow up it deserved, because this course just feels so much better to play now. All in all, aside from Luigi Raceway, a really solid cup with pretty much no courses that I can point to as being actively bad. It makes every other Shell Cup in the series look like a joke. Number 19, the Mario Kart Wii Special Cup. It's been a while since we've talked about Mario Kart Wii, and that's due to the fact that literally every single Nitro Cup in this game placed in the top 20. This game absolutely cooked with its Nitro selection. That being said, the weakest of Wii's Nitro Cups to me is its Special Cup. However, that's not really an insult at all, since it still did place at number 19 on this list. This might be the first cup that we've got where I can truly say I can't pick out one particular course as the low point of the cup. They're all really solid, and I honestly am not even sure which one is my favorite or least favorite. Unlike most of the cups we've talked about, where I could easily point to one course as being the standout, and one course is the one that drags the cup down, this cup is just consistently really good throughout. We start off with Dry Dry Ruins, one of the best desert courses in the series by far. The sand section is super twisty and fun with plenty of pokies to dodge, and the Yoshi Sphinx, which is just the best thing ever. Plus, something about this course is just more aesthetically pleasing than most of the other desert courses. It's probably all the foliage and the fact that it goes for a more yellowish color palette rather than just beige, but this course looks really nice. And then you have the temple section, which not only looks great, but has a pretty cool gimmick, having it slowly fill up with sand as the race progresses, until you basically can't take the middle path anymore. While this doesn't impact the race too terribly much, I still think it's a neat gimmick. Leaving the temple, there's also a pretty fun shortcut you can take if you have a mushroom, which is always super satisfying since it's way faster than having to navigate around the long turn. Plus the music is really good and takes a far more energetic vibe compared to a lot of the other desert courses in the series. I dig this one. And then next we have Moonview Highway, which is even better. It basically took what Toad's Turnpike was going for and added a more interesting layout to boot. It's so satisfying to successfully weave through all the cars, and the bomb cars make for a great obstacle, or it can make for a fun way to troll other players if you have a green shell. I also love these shortcuts up on the sides, and maneuvering through the city section is a ton of fun. I also have fond memories of family game nights since I was the only one in the family who actually enjoyed this track, and so I just pick it just to troll my family members. That's not to say I was good at it, I just hit as many cars as everyone else, but it wasn't about winning, it was making the people around me suffer. And I guess I still haven't learned since now I'm a part-time Rob main in Smash Bros. And hold pretty much that same philosophy. I think I should probably not play video games anymore. I will say that this is one of those tracks that unfortunately now lives in the shadow of a remake that I like significantly better, and that same sentiment goes for the music. The original arrangement is stellar, but the 8 remix is so good that I almost always choose to listen to it rather than the original. Still, it wouldn't have been able to have been so good if it didn't have a good original skeleton to work off of, and that same philosophy goes for the track itself. Then we get to this game's Bowser Castle, and like I alluded to earlier, this is one of my favorite iterations of the track. Like the 8 version, there's just so many little things this track does really well. This twisty corridor section that shakes up and down, plenty of thwomps to dodge, a great use of the giant Bowser statue where you can choose to either use the half-pipes to dodge the fireballs and get across, or time taking the middle path perfectly while trying to avoid the fireball as much as possible, and an overall haunting and imposing atmosphere. The section with the lava geysers at the end also serves as a very hectic end to the course, as you desperately try and dodge each of them flawlessly so you can pass your fellow players. It's just such a stellar track, and I want this version of Bowser's Castle to come back more than any other iteration of the track, even though I like the 8 Deluxe version more. So far, each course has just been another step up in quality from the last. This cup was really preparing to end up ranking near the very top of the list, and then Rainbow Road comes along. Don't click off. Listen, I love this track too. It's a classic for a reason. The absolutely magical atmosphere, the balls-to-the-wall difficulty, all the twisty paths in the sky, and the section that I really love where you can either take the half-pipes or boost to get across the middle. Plus the Star Tunnel is absolutely magical, and the music is also, it's phenomenal. I also love the detail that you're above Earth and burn up into a fireball when you fall off. I just love the mental image of Lakitu having to fly down to Earth to grab you as you're traveling at the speed of a meteor, only for you to probably fall off again 5 seconds later. I think this track is really, really good, but I don't think it's perfect like many others seem to. Firstly, I feel like the majesty of this track can sometimes be outshined by the difficulty, which I know that that's probably just a skill issue, but usually I'm way more worried about staying on the track rather than being mesmerized by the absolutely phenomenal atmosphere of the track. I know that Rainbow Roads are supposed to be hard, but this can seem like too much sometimes, and a lot of these turns feel a little unfair, especially in Wii's engine. This also does now have the unfortunate plight of now having a remake that I just think does this track's idea way better, making the difficulty and majesty more balanced with each other, rather than having this version where it can feel rather skewed and not really knowing what it wants to do at some points. I still love this track a lot, and I have plenty of fond memories with it, but revisiting this cup, I don't think it carries it like many others seem to think it does. Still, like I said, every track in this cup stands on its own 2 feet as a damn good track, and I love all of them. It's just that the competition up here is real stiff, and because of that, this doesn't quite crack much higher on the list than this. Number 18, the Super Circuit Lightning Cup, my favorite cup in all of Mario Kart Super Circuit. Not sure if this is an unpopular opinion or not, but this is just another cup where it stays consistently good throughout, with no course that I can point to as being a real stinker. Starting with Luigi Circuit, and like I said, while it's not my favorite course in this game, it's still quite solid, and it fits this game's engine much better than DS's. It really tests your drifting skills, and since the drifting here is less intuitive than in other games, it can get pretty tricky to stay on the track at some points. That's what's so great about it though, since you're currently in the midpoint between what are basically the tutorial cups and the harder cups, making this serve as sort of a driving test. The puddles are also really fun to dodge, and the aesthetic is pretty good too, taking place in an airfield with a Luigi blimp in the background. I think this course is pretty good and is a good starter for this cup. Then we get to one of the best courses in the whole game, that being Sky Garden. It bolsters a beautiful green color palette, making it one of the best looking courses in Super Circuit. See that, BCP? Green! Has an incredible music track, and some of the most fun intended shortcuts in the whole game. Plus the turns are all great, and it's just all in all an amazing course to drive on. I talked about the DS version a bit and how I like it slightly better, but this original version is still phenomenal, and I love playing on it. It's the standout of this cup for sure, but the other 2 courses we have remaining are also pretty big standouts in their own ways. Cheep Cheep Island is just so pleasant, having a beautiful skybox, really fun turns, and several sections that feel far more open than usual, this neat boardwalk section, and a really cozy music track. I like this one a lot, it's just really nice. Dare I say it, this track has vibes. It's one of the few courses where no matter how hard I try and rack my brain, I can't really figure out what specifically about it makes me like it so much. I really think it's just the combination of a bunch of small things, along with a really pretty aesthetic that just clicks for me. And then we get to another standout track from this game, that being Sunset Wilds. I love this track. It has a great layout and super fun turns, unique obstacles with these shy guys that latch onto your cart and eat your coins, which is a really cute gimmick that I wish they would have kept for the 8 Deluxe version. A really nice orangish color scheme that I wish they would have kept for the 8 Deluxe version, especially on the road. And of course the standout gimmick, the fact that the sun sets with each lap, with the first lap taking place at sunset, the second lap taking place under a pink sky, and the final lap taking place at night. I wish they would have kept that for the 8 Deluxe version. Really solid stuff. I really enjoy this track. All in all, this cup has 4 tracks that I'd call some of the best that this game has to offer, and every single track, while not quite better than the last, does build off of the momentum of the last. It's just a really solid cup, and the absolute best that Super Circuit has to offer, which means it's sadly time to eliminate it from the ranking. Honestly, going back to Super Circuit, I was surprised with how much I enjoyed myself. It's a really solid game with some fun tracks and a control scheme that's much improved from the last 2D offering. It's a genuinely good game, and I feel like some people don't give it enough credit. Honestly, I think you all just have a skill issue. Number 17, the Mario Kart DS Flower Cup. The first DS Cup that we've seen in a while, and this is a pretty great one. It starts off with desert hills, and yes, I know what you're gonna say, and I don't think this course drags down this cup at all, really. I didn't like it in Wii because it didn't fit the engine that well, and it was one of the lamer priority retros that they could have brought back from this game. But in its original incarnation, I mean, it's nothing to write home about, but it's alright. I think it mainly just comes down to this course controlling way better in DS's engine than in Wii's, and I also think that the colors just look way better here and make it feel more out of Mario 3. Plus, since this game is pretty difficult to front-run in, at least in my opinion, lots of the shortcuts present here are really appreciated. I also like the windy section at the end a lot more than I did in Wii's, and the fireballs are neat obstacles. Again, I'm not really sure what it is exactly that makes me enjoy this version significantly more, but when I really think about it, I think it just comes down to it controlling way better here. That said, it is the low point of this cup, but it's not bad. Then we go to Delfino Square, and immediately, this is already such a huge step up in quality. I love this course. It feels like such a big and sprawling city, which is helped by some of the alternate routes in the shortcut that takes you down an alleyway. The marketplace also generally just gives off a vibe of feeling lived in, more so than most city tracks in the series. It's one of those tracks that just feels like an actual location, and it makes it one of the most immersive tracks in the series. The massive drawbridge is also still awesome. Honestly, not much else to say that I didn't already mention for the Wii version. It's just really, really good. Then all of a sudden we get Waluigi Pinball. I like the 8 version that we discussed a while ago when we talked about the Turnip Cup much more, but this version is still fantastic. However, the one thing that this version does have over the 8 version is this sound that plays when you exit the pinball table. I don't know why they took it out. It added a nice bit of immersion, and the sound effect was really satisfying. Aside from that, yeah, I mean, it's Waluigi Pinball. It's phenomenal, you all know it's phenomenal, and I already talked about how much I enjoyed it earlier. I don't think I mentioned how amazing the pinballs are as an obstacle, though. They're basically just a better version of cars on traffic courses, since you're either racing against the pinball and trying to pass it without hitting it, or you haven't seen it, in which case you need to stay on your toes. It's a really neat obstacle exclusive to this course, and it's just another thing that makes this course absolutely stellar. And then we go to Shroom Ridge, and while we already did talk about the 8 Deluxe version, which I like much more, this version is still great. The cars are as fun to dodge as ever, the music track is one of my favorites in this game, and I don't know, man, it's just got great vibes. Sorry if my segments on these courses are a lot more vague, it's just I've already talked about different versions of all 4 of these tracks earlier in the video, and I don't feel much like repeating myself, because I have a lot of the same thoughts. All in all, we've got Desert Hills, which I have no strong feelings for one way or the other, but don't dislike, and 3 of the best tracks in the entire game, easily making this cup my second favorite from DS. We'll get to my favorite soon enough, though. Number 16, the Mario Kart Wii Mushroom Cup. Mario Kart Wii has the best Mushroom Cup in the series, and it's not even remotely a competition. Double Dash is the second best one, and it didn't even crack the top 30. This one is so far above the rest that it's actually insane. We start off with Luigi Circuit, which a lot of people seem to really dislike, and I'm not really sure I mean, I do kind of know why. It's relatively simple and kind of a boring starter course, and it is the easy low point of the cup for sure, but I don't think it's bad. It's easy, and it serves as a solid tutorial to this game, and while I don't love it, I don't think it ruins the cup by any means. It just leaves me pretty much nothing to talk about with it. However, then we get on a non-stop winning streak with the next 3. Moo Moo Meadows is great. People are kind of mean to this version in particular, but I still think it's really good. And while it doesn't compare to the 8 Deluxe version, I still enjoy it quite a bit. Dodging the cows and the moles is a lot of fun. The section with the grass mounds is fun to navigate, and this course is just all in all a ton of fun to drive on. Then we get the double punch of Mushroom Gorge and Toad's Factory, 2 of my favorite courses in this game. Starting with Mushroom Gorge, I mean, I've talked about it twice already. This original version is even better physics-wise though, since the mushrooms here are bouncier than ever. I'm still not sure which version is my overall favorite, but this one is still incredible. And when we get to Toad's Factory, I have been waiting for this one. This is far and away one of my favorite tracks in the entire series. First off, before we talk about anything on the track itself, this is my favorite music track in all of Mario Kart Wii, yes, even outdoing Coconut Mall and Rainbow Road. I would kill to get a remaster of this course solely to hear an official remix of this song done. It's so damn amazing, and it really makes this course that much more of a treat to play on. The track itself is absolutely phenomenal too. It makes great use of its main gimmick, that being the conveyor belts, from this first section where you have to ride them to dodge these stamps, which, while also having the great mechanic of having this backwards conveyor, which is the only way to get an item here, but will significantly slow you down, to this section where you have to balance on them while avoiding boxes to avoid falling in the water, to this ending section where you have to try and stay on the faster path. These really show you out of the gate that this game is not messing around when it comes to difficulty. Then you go through this ending section of the factory with sirens blaring as you jump out and the music loops where you're greeted with the final section of the course, where you have to try and maneuver through the mud to hit the boost panels. This entire course is just so intense and fun, and I love it so much. It's an absolute crime and disgrace that it hasn't come back yet, especially not in Tour, and I'm praying it to see it in the next game, because a glow-up of this could genuinely stand up as one of the greatest retro tracks of all time. It's the main reason this cup was able to carry as high as it did, but Mushroom Gorge and Moo Moo Meadows can absolutely stand on their own feet. And while Luigi Circuit is kinda lame, I still don't think it's bad enough to drag this cup down. And crazily enough, we still have 2 Wii Cups to go. Number 15, the Mario Kart 7 Lightning Cup. Kicking off the top 15 with another Mario Kart 7 Cup, we have the Lightning Cup. We're starting to get to the point where the retro cups in this series are damn near perfect. Notice I said near, though. Starting off, we have this game's Koopa Cape. Okay, so it's not as bad as the 8 Deluxe version, not by a long shot. Graphically, this version wins every single day of the week. It kept pretty much everything the same, aside from adding one glider ramp, and I was ready to say I loved it as much as the original, but then they just completely cut the balls off the underwater section. I completely blame 7 for this, because even though 8 Deluxe did this course far dirtier than this version could ever try and compare to, the butchering of the underwater section was all 7's fault. Again, graphically it looks fine down here, but why is it opened up? The regional felt like one of those glass tubes you walk through at aquariums, and it was absolutely stunning. It made this course stand out to me in such a big way as a kid, but now the magic is just gone. On top of that, the unique electric obstacles are gone too for pretty much no reason, so this section is just pointless now. Great. I don't dislike this remake nearly as much as it might sound like. I mean, if I did, this cup wouldn't be placing so high. But the fact that they took one of my favorite sections from any track in the series and then just turned it into another pointless underwater thing frustrates me to no end. Other than that, it's still pretty much the same great course though. The rapid section is still a ton of fun and it feels like a water slide. The waterfall at the end is a genuinely compelling obstacle, and all in all, I still really like this course. I just will never be able to get over what we lost in the underwater section. However, thankfully that's where my complaints end with this cup. Next we go to Dino Dino Jungle. I love this course, and this remake did a great job with preserving it. I will say that I wish that the section at the beginning with the dinosaur still had item boxes instead of just coins, since I feel like that make him into a far more compelling obstacle there. But that's pretty much my only complaint with this course as a remake. Otherwise, it's stellar. The bridge section feels far more fair here with the better controls, while still feeling pretty challenging to get the hang of. And the added glider ramp at the end is a great touch, since now instead of just going under the dinosaur, you can fly right at him. I also like that they kept the geysers hazardous. They easily could have just made them any old regular trick opportunity, and if this course came back in 8 Deluxe, they probably would have. But they're still the same compelling track hazard that they were in the original, and they really keep you on your toes. All in all, a really solid remake of one of my favorite courses from Double Dash. And then we go to Airship Fortress, holy shit. Not only are all of the unique obstacles from the original kept in this version, but this course looks so much better. I love DS, but its art style is, let's just say, not the most detailed. However, now this course is in a game that actually looks good. And look good it does. I love the purple and orange skybox, the updated textures on everything, and just how detailed it all looks. The music got quite the upgrade too, feeling much more grand here. This also perfectly serves as the final gauntlet you have to go through before you get to Rainbow Road, serving the role as the penultimate course extremely well with how intricate and difficult this course's layout and obstacles are. If you're not going to have a Bowser Castle be the final challenge of your game before the big finale, this is pretty much the best course you could possibly go with as a replacement. I still love everything about this course, and I really hope it returns in the next game. And then to finish off the entire retro selection of this game, we have SNES Rainbow Road. This was the perfect choice to end 7's retro selection, and I love it a lot. I have a really special place in my heart for the 8 Deluxe version, and while I don't hold this one to quite the same standard, it's still a great remake. It's amazing to see this course in an updated engine, and while 8 wins graphically, I mean, obviously, I still think that this course looks great here. The music is still great as ever, and all the magic that this course has always had as the first Rainbow Road in the series is still there. I really do think it was an amazing way to come full circle and show how far we've come in the series without just bringing back Mario Circuit 3 for the 6th time. I do wish that the shockwaves that the thwomps made were a little bigger, but otherwise this is the same great course it's always been. All in all, a fantastic end to 7's retro selection, and easily one of the best retro cups in the series. If this cup wasn't responsible for the violent butchering of Koopa Cape, it might even have been the best, but top 15 is still nothing to sneeze at. Back with another 7 cup, we have number 14, the Mario Kart 7 Flower Cup. God, what a solid selection here. Even the worst course here is still some of the absolute best of its archetype, and the other 3 are some of my absolute favorites in the entire game, hell, maybe even the entire series. Starting off, we have Woohoo Loop, possibly one of the best starters to any cup, period. Nintendo really placed this as their opener to the second cup in the game like it was no big deal. I've never played Wii Sports Resort, and I don't even know the names of these locations, but the track just does such a good job at being memorable anyway that I still absolutely love it. You start off in the city before you drive over a bridge where you get a trick opportunity before driving down this road and racing down the traffic, before you learn that you're not taking another lap around, you're just going to keep driving straight through the course. If I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure this is the first course in the series to do this. Hell, it's the first one I played, and I was blown away. You drive through a tunnel before taking a loop around this mountain where you get opportunities to drive off the track and take alternate paths, which I absolutely love when tracks do this, because it really adds to the replay value. You'll never see all of this track in one go, and it adds so much value to it because of that. There's also a pretty difficult shortcut you can take here, and if I'm not mistaken, I'm pretty sure you can do it without a mushroom. And nothing quite compares to this track's final lap, featuring a downhill descent and making a mad dash to the finish as you get your way back to where you started. I mean, something compares to it for sure, but we'll get to that when we get to that. Just an absolutely incredible course. Anyway, then we go to Mario Circuit. However, this course is helped by being one of the absolute best Mario Circuits in the series. Driving past the unique cherry blossom trees, the mushroom bounds, the fact that you get to actually drive through the castle, something no other track does if I'm not mistaken, a solid glider section, and a pipe tunnel all make this one of the most memorable Mario Circuits in the series. I actually really like it, and I don't think it kills the momentum of this cup too much, especially considering what comes after. Music Park is one of the most well-executed themes in the entire series, and I already discussed why the layout of this track is so good a while ago when we covered the 8 Deluxe version. I don't really have anything new to add about this version since nothing really changed between them aside from the graphics, but it's still phenomenal. But even I, the #1 Mario Kart 8 Rock defender, still must admit that this version is a little bit better. Graphically, this version clears hard, and the gliding does feel freer here. Otherwise, it's pretty much the same, so I don't have much new to say about it. All in all, 4 tracks that are all varying degrees of really solid. Amazing cup, and somehow still the second worst Nitro Cup in 7, holy shit. Now we get to the best cup in Mario Kart DS, which, in my opinion, is number 13, the Mario Kart DS Special Cup. There just isn't a single low point here. We start with Wario Stadium, and this might be an unpopular opinion, but I actually like this version way more than the remake. 8 does have the bonus of actually having a trick system, but I think it just has so much charm here. The simplistic art style of DS actually works in this track's favor, because even though most of the track is just light brown, I feel like this version just pops out way more than the 8 Deluxe version, which is just kind of filled with dirt that all looks the same as any other dirt in the game. And even though there's no tricks in this game, I still think going off the speed ramps is a lot of fun, and dodging the fireballs is really satisfying. I really like this version of the track. It's nothing too insane, but it's just charming. Then there's Peach Gardens, and while this is the weakest version of this track in my opinion, it's still great. I've pretty much said already everything that I want to say on this track, though, and since this is the original version, there isn't really anything unique I have to say about it compared to the other 2 versions, aside from the fact that it's a little more difficult in my opinion, so I think we can move on. Especially because the next 2 tracks in this cup are ones that we haven't seen yet in the whole video so far. This game's Bowser's Castle is personally one of my favorite iterations of the whole track, and no, it's not just because of the spinny log, though that is a very big factor. I just love how this whole track feels like a Bowser-themed factory. It takes on a much more mechanical style than a lot of the Bowser castles that came before it, with this spinny section with the firebars and spikes, this bridge where you have the potential of getting into an intense fight with another player, and the section right after the spinny log with the shifting squares. And of course there's the spinny log itself. I love this thing. You have to be extremely careful on how you turn on here to prevent yourself from falling off. You need to be extra careful regarding items. You're on your toes pretty much the entire time, and I really like it for that. And that philosophy goes for pretty much the entire track. There's so many moving parts, and you always need to be aware of what you're doing and where you're going. And I think that makes for a really compelling obstacle course and a great and honestly kinda underrated Bowser's Castle track. And then this game's Rainbow Road is great too. It perfectly combines feeling magical and feeling difficult, perfectly serving as the final level of this game, if you don't count all of these. There's this section taken from GCN Rainbow Road with the boost pads where you need to stay on the track. Some pretty tricky turns, and the first time ever that a track has had anti-gravity sections that still feel just as fun even after all this time. I love going on the corkscrew in the loop, it's an amazing spectacle. Sure, if you get hit, you will go absolutely flying into the abyss, but I don't know, I think that's funny. The music is also really nice. I just love this Rainbow Road a lot. All in all, a phenomenal selection with 4 tracks that I love. It's not quite the best special cup in the series, which is insane to say, but it's easily my favorite cup in Mario Kart DS, which I guess means it's time to eliminate it from the ranking. This game did end up with a not so pretty average just because of how many of the retro cups here suck absolute balls, but the Nitro selection here is one of the best ones in the series. I really love this game, and if you take the retro selection out, it did a really solid job. Number 12, Mario Kart 7 Special Cup. 7 Special Cup is yet another one with absolutely no low points. Now, I know what you're gonna say, and shut up, but before we get to that, let's talk about DK Jungle. I already talked about this one way back when we talked about 8's Banana Cup, and I don't really have anything new to say on this version, so fine, I'll admit it, I like Rosalina's Ice World, but I completely understand why people don't. It is barely Galaxy-themed, and it doesn't really have anything to do with Rosalina as a character, but I don't know, I still think it's fun. I really like the big loop at the beginning. The music is simultaneously really pretty and really haunting. This section where you get to choose between going up on the top path or going underwater where you need a speed up item to go on it on the second and third laps is a really smart gimmick in my opinion. The turns are enjoyable to take, and I don't know, aside from the lack of references, I just don't see much wrong with this course. It's pretty fun in my opinion, and while I do get why its reception is so mixed, it just has a lot of aspects that I really enjoy that make me enjoy it significantly more. Did I really write that? God damn. And I know that this game's Bowser's Castle is pretty divisive too, but honestly, I really enjoy it. Firstly, it has one of my favorite music tracks out of any of the Bowser Castles, feeling simultaneously menacing and really exciting. I also really enjoy the split path section at the beginning. It doesn't amount to too much, but it's a really neat way to provide some decision to the player and split up the race. And even more paths open up on the second and third lap, splitting up the race even more. Honestly, if this course was remade in a game with 12 racers, or 24 racers from what we were seeing from Mario Kart 9, this section might end up being one of the most memorable just because of how it locks certain players on the same path together, providing closer interactions. I also just love Bowser's Castles with lots of moving parts, and this one is no exception. All the lava guys are shooting out of the track with a risk-reward element where you have to decide whether to risk getting hit by lava to get an extra trick are great additions. There's tons of thwomps to dodge, and this series of spinny logs always feels satisfying to take. And damn it, I actually kinda like the underwater section. Sure, it does feel a little strangely placed, but it's so bizarre that I actually kind of admire it. And the lava pillars are a super fun obstacle to take. I just really like this Bowser Castle, and it's up there with 8 and Wii's as one of my favorites in the series. Probably an unpopular opinion, but I don't care. This track is really cool. However, even with how great these 3 courses are, none of them can compare to the absolute GOAT, this game's Rainbow Road. I already sang its praises earlier when we talked about the Moon Cup, but it's an absolute masterpiece and one of my favorites in the entire series. It's just so ethereal, so magical, so unique from every other Rainbow Road, and hell, pretty much every other track ever made. It feels like a genuine adventure more than any other course, and the phenomenal music combined with the breathtaking visuals do an amazing job at making you feel reflective on your whole journey thus far. I'll always love this track, and everything I mentioned with the layout for 8 Deluxe still holds really true here. It's an absolute masterpiece, an insanely solid Special Cup in my opinion. I know many people won't see it that way, depending on your opinions on DK Jungle, Bowser Castle, and Rosalina's Ice World especially, but I honestly think it's one of the best ones in the series. Not the best though, as we'll see soon enough. Just barely missing out on the top 10, we have my second favorite cup in Mario Kart Wii and the best Flower Cup in the entire series. That being number 11, Mario Kart Wii's Flower Cup. This is a fantastic cup that has 3 of the most iconic courses in the whole series. Before we get to those though, we have to talk about our last Mario circuit of this entire video. And honestly, this is one of the more solid ones in the series in my opinion. I don't know exactly what it is about it, I think it is just the vibes. I love driving through this part of the Mushroom Kingdom. It feels like a unique little neighborhood that we've never seen before, and all the buildings just look really nice. Plus the signs are super charming, you can even see Princess Peach's castle in the background. After passing this, there's a cool shortcut you can take behind this chain chomp that I always enjoy taking, and plenty of Goombas to dodge. It's nothing insane, but I think it's a fine addition to the cup, especially considering what comes after it, that being Coconut Mall. I mean, what more is there to say about what is possibly the most iconic course in the entire Mario Kart series? I can distinctly remember that whenever I played this game with my family, this was like the one track where everyone was happy to see it get picked. Layout-wise, this is easily the best version of this course, having the escalators be an actual obstacle and the cars be really tricky to dodge. It's also great visually. I think I prefer 8's visuals overall, but there's something so special about the charm of this version. With the Miis that adorn the halls in this version all cheering you on, the have a nice day as you get launched out the mall, and the giant rotating Coconut Mall sign that sadly never appeared again, even in the 8 version. This easily has the most charm out of any version of this course, and it really helps this track feel way livelier as a result. And the rest of the layout, I mean, again, it's Coconut Mall. I love the little shortcut through the shop here, checking off the fountains, and the parking lot is really intense here and makes for a great and hectic ending to this course. I love this course just as much as everyone else. I would say it's the standout of the cup, but quite honestly, the next course kinda gives it a run for its money. DK Summit is incredible, I have practically nothing to complain about with this course. Well, except for the fact that they used a giant statue of Mario instead of DK. I don't know what they were cooking there, and I'm glad that they fixed that when they brought it over to 8 Deluxe. And we Andy still claim this to be the best game in the series. Your goat is washed, it doesn't even have the Donkey Kong statue. For real though, everything else about this course is awesome. This has an amazing course with the giant cannon, serving as a cooler replacement for what would be a ski lift, having you get shot up all the way from the ground all the way to the top of the summit where you have to ski all the way back down, and doing so is a ton of fun. I love doing tricks on the half-pipes that line this course, bouncing on these bumps in the road and taking this ending section with these super tight turns that are equally intense and thrilling at the same time. And making it back down to the finish line where you can see the Shy Guys doing snowboard tricks is the perfect way to finish out this course. Plus the music is great and somehow feels simultaneously really chill and really exciting. And hey, I guess that does fit the idea of a ski mountain pretty well. It's phenomenal, it's always been a favorite of mine to pick whenever I play this game. I would easily call this the standout of the cup, but actually it kinda is, but the next course is great too. Wario's Gold Mine, the definitive version of Wario's Gold Mine, by the way. I love this stupid course and its bullshit difficulty. Not only did it make for a phenomenal troll pick when I play this game with others, but it's also just really satisfying to finally learn this course and nail the turns without falling off every 10 seconds. The fact that this is last in the Flower Cup makes it feel like a great transition from the easier cups to the more difficult ones, and it serves that job perfectly because I feel like pretty much everyone agrees that this is at least the second most difficult course in this game, behind the obvious front runner. It feels like a roller coaster ride throughout, and it's absolutely thrilling. And look at that, the minecarts are actually a hazard here, you love to see it. Just a phenomenal cup here. It did sort of fall victim to the Flower Cup curse where it was burdened with having to carry a Mario circuit, which is the main reason that I kept it out of the top 10, but the other 3 courses are great, and easily solidifies this as the best Flower Cup in the entire series in my opinion. Wii is 3 for 3 with phenomenal Nitro Cups so far, so let's see if it can keep that streak going. Alright, now we've hit the real final stretch, the top 10, the elite. These are the 10 cups that I consider to be as close to perfect as possible, and they easily take the spot as my favorites in the entire series. Without further ado, let's get into the first of these, that being number 10, the Booster Course Pass Flower Cup. It's Flower Cup. It's been a while since we've seen an 8 Deluxe Cup, but there's a very good reason for that. You'll see soon that the top 10 is chock full of cups from 8 Deluxe, and that's because the gap between the good cups and the great cups in this game is absolutely massive. Hell, you can see that visualized with how this list turned out. It's been over 10 spots since we've even seen an 8 Deluxe Cup. All of them so far have had something that dragged them down to just being good rather than phenomenal in my opinion. We've had a couple that have been pretty big stinkers, but the ones that we're going to see soon have practically no problems in my eyes. Anyway, let's get to our first example of that with the Fruit Cup. We start off with what is in my opinion one of the better city tracks, that being Amsterdam Drift. I don't know what it is exactly, I just really like this one. It's not the most ambitious city track, but I really like what it tries to go for, gliding over the train, driving through the town and dodging the trolley, going through the canals and getting boosted up by the water, and my favorite detail, getting to see the other racers coming at you the other way. There are some large stretches where you aren't really doing anything that interesting, and it could look a little better graphically, but all in all, this one's just pleasant. I know that I didn't have a lot to say on this one, but fortunately this cup is one of the ones that just consistently gets better and better throughout, which is apparent with our next track, Riverside Park. I love this remake so much. It's a fantastic update on the original Super Circuit course, and one of my favorite Super Circuit remakes in this entire game, to be honest. It's one of the best looking courses in the entire Booster Course Pass for literally no reason, which definitely earns it some points. I love the gimmick of the Patuis that carry items where you have to hit them to get the item, because it leads to some fun interaction with those bananas and mushrooms littered all over the track. And taking the ending turn and putting it in a cave where you get to burst out of a waterfall is an amazing addition. It's a bit on the shorter side, which does knock it down from being one of my absolute favorites, but it's still a certified banger that I always have a good time on. The music is also really good, and it feels really unique from everything else in this game, feeling really funky and groovy, and focusing a lot on the low brass and bari sax. And then we go to DK Summit. I just finished talking about how much I love the Wii version, and this version is no different. It looks great, the double gap jump is amazing, and a little easier to pull off here, and they even finally added a statue of DK instead of Mario. I also like how these bumps in the road are a little bigger now, it makes them feel a tiny bit more satisfying to trick off of. My only problem with this version is that the half-pipe physics in this game can be a little wacky, but even that doesn't drag it down too much, because it is pretty funny to just get propelled into the heavens suddenly. I absolutely love this track, and this remake does a great job updating it. And then, as if we weren't already feasting before with Riverside Park and DK Summit, we get to end off the cup with Yoshi's Island. Good lord, what a track. This probably cracks my top 10 courses in this entire game, to be honest. It's just such a treat. For a track that takes you through so many different locations, it does a great job of making them all feel distinct, while also not dragging on through any one location for too long. I'm able to remember tons of locations on this course off the top of my head, like the grass section that saves itself from the usual grass pitfalls, by taking on a unique orangish color scheme and actually looking unique instead of just being green, the underwater section, the cave section, the snow section, and my personal favorite part, the clouds, just gliding up over this volcano, tricking on this ramp, drifting through the clouds and then gliding all the way back down to where you started, is just such a phenomenal way to end off a track like this. And don't think I didn't see the little question mark cloud there that spawns in a unique bridge shortcut. There's honestly not a single shortcut like this in this game. The closest thing I can think of is the puzzle in Hyrule Circuit. Honestly, there's just no other course really like this in general. It's easily my favorite crossover track in 8 Deluxe, aside from one other, which, believe me, we will get to. And really does a great job at selling me on this game. I really want to play Yoshi's Island now because this track makes it look really cool, so congrats Nintendo for doing your job. Absolutely phenomenal cup. Usually at the end of these I've been saying the main reason that the cup can't rank higher, but for this one, I honestly don't even really have a reason. I just like other cups better, and the competition is really stiff up here. Like I said, pretty much all of these top 10 cups are perfect. Number 9, the Booster Course Pass Feather Cup. The Feather Cup is another one that's amazing because each course just builds off of the last one in a really compelling way. To me, this is a cup that just gets consistently better and better. Starting with a course I already love and easily one of the best tourist cities, Athens Dash. This is a track so good that I've even heard tour detractors sing its praises, and I think there's a very good reason for that. Instead of taking place on some random city streets, it takes place among Greek architecture. It makes this course stand out so much more, and because of that, I honestly rarely ever think of it as a city track. Instead, it feels like a fantastical adventure. Some of the turns can be a little unpredictable on your first couple go-arounds, and these buildings look rough, but that's par for the course for these tour tracks, and you get used to it eventually. Otherwise, this is a damn great course that's still somehow the worst one in this cup. Next is Daisy Cruiser, and damn, what a glow-up this course got. It looks fantastic. The bright and vibrant colors just make this course pop so much more. It feels so much more full of life than its original incarnation. Literally, they added people to the dining tables and put Goombas in the pool. Layout-wise, there isn't too many changes between this and 7, but just the look alone makes this an improvement, and I already really liked the layout. They didn't bring back the inner tubes, unfortunately, but I guess that's fair since the Goombas are using them right now. Otherwise, this track is incredible. And then we go to Moonview Highway. Holy shit, this remake is peak. Updated visuals that are a treat to look at, the long-awaited return of the bomb cars in Mario Kart 8, improved reward for the shortcuts since now you can get a double item if you take this one, and a damn phenomenal music track that easily stands as one of, if not my absolute favorite in this game. My literal only complaint with this remake is that a tiny bit of the difficulty from Wii is gone. Insert reference to funny "Where are the cars, man?" here.
Moonview Highway enjoyers when they see a track with like less than 17,000 cars.
However, that's not enough to keep this from being an absolute masterpiece. Drifting between the cars and nailing every boost feels as satisfying as ever, and one of my favorite pastimes in this entire game is placing a banana peel into a bomb car's path, and then watching chaos unfold behind me. Definitely the standout of the BCP for sure, and that's not even the best course in this cup, because then we finish off with Squeaky Clean Sprint. This course is just filled to the brim with charm and incredible level design. I mean, you're driving around in a bathroom, that's so cool. It has one of the most justified implementations of underwater driving in this whole game, considering you are in a bathtub. And the underwater actually does feel quite fun here. Traversing the tub, getting sucked down the drain, finding a wedding ring that got stuck down here, RIP to that person, grabbing items as they float by before you burst out onto the floor where you get pushed by a fan across the soapy floor before you fly over a toilet. I love the implementation of this toilet since it can blow you up onto an upper path that you can't reach otherwise on the second and third lap, providing access to a lot of different paths that you can take at the beginning. It really adds to the replay value of this track. Plus, hitting someone in the air and knocking them into a literal toilet bowl is like the funniest thing ever. And the music is just the cherry on top, so whimsical and fun and surprisingly fitting in a way that I can't really explain. I love this track, and I think it's an indication of the fact that Nintendo has still got it when it comes to making creative and racetrack themes and executing them perfectly. I just have no complaints with this cup, it's just chock full of bangers. And it's still not my favorite cup in the BCP somehow. It's a very, very, very close second to number 8, the Booster Course Pass Spiny Cup. Now this cup is probably good less quality-wise on average compared to the Feather Cup, but I'm not really factoring averages into this ranking, and there's a very important reason that this cup is ranked above it, which is that the highs are way higher. The two best courses in this cup are so good that they both probably crack my top 5 in this entire game, and while the other two don't quite reach that high, they do an excellent job at being supporting players. For example, our first course, Madrid Drive, one of the better city tracks in my opinion due to the fact that you're actually doing interesting stuff most of the time. Even without looking up footage of the course, I'm able to remember several memorable locations we get to go through off the top of my head. The museum, the town square with the massive Wiggler, that's our boy, and the shortcut that's kind of awkward to pull off, but fairly beneficial if you manage to do it, and my favorite section, the soccer field. Probably the best sports stadium that we get to drive through in any of these city courses. I love dodging the shoe Goombas and trying to hit all the boosts while avoiding the giant ball. There are quite a few sections that are just roads, but the turns are fun enough to distract from that rather than just being on long straightaways like some of the other cities. I like this course. It's not my favorite, but it's usually pretty fun to play on. And the music is also really nice. I love the Spanish guitar and castanets. They fit this track absolutely perfectly. Next we take a tiny bit of a step down with Rosalina's Ice World, but I still really enjoy this track. I like the implementation of these half pipes here. It always felt like this track wanted to have half pipes in this spot, but was just never able to implement them due to the fact that half pipes weren't real on the 3DS. Other than that, there's not really many changes aside from the graphical update and the added shortcut, and hey, I like those changes, so this version is fine by me. I know there are a lot of people who say that it didn't deserve a spot in the Booster Course Pass, and like, yeah, I was kinda annoyed that we got this instead of something better, but I think I've gotten over it by now. We'll get Airship Fortress in the next game, hopefully. And I feel like this version of Rosalina's Ice World is good enough to warrant a spot, even if it wouldn't have been my first choice whatsoever. So far, this cup has been consistently good, but nothing phenomenal yet. However, it was only using these two courses to build up to the phenomenal finale of the entire Booster Course Pass, the 1-2 punch of SNES Bowser Castle 3 and Wii Rainbow Road. Two courses that would probably crack my top 5 in the entire game. Starting with Bowser Castle 3, which may possibly be my favorite retro course in this game. It just got such a phenomenal glow up. Looks-wise, it's one of the best in the entire BCP, to the point where if I had never seen this course and you told me it was part of Base 8 Deluxe, I would believe you. The textures of the floor, the walls, the lava constantly surrounding you, it just all looks amazing. Music-wise, it's one of the best glow-ups a song in the series has ever gotten, turning a song that I didn't really care for originally into an absolute banger that's now one of my favorite songs in this entire game. And layout-wise, they really cooked here. The split path section feels far more compelling. If they didn't put any hazards or items here, you'd always take the leftmost path no matter what, but now it's more dangerous too, since that's the only spot with a gated floor where lava can shoot out, providing a risk-reward factor I really like. Plus, you have to come at it from the right if you want to try and get a double item, making it slightly more difficult to get all the way from the right to the left. And the rightmost path is what you'll want to take if you're trying to build your coin counter. They took the original idea from the SNES track and just built off of it, and made one of the most compelling sections of any course in this game. And that's just how this course starts. After you leave this, you get one of the biggest anti-grav inclines in the entire BCP, and then you're greeted with these thwomps, who wouldn't really pose a threat unless you want to drive on top of the walls, in which case you need to take an outside turn around them, turning them into a really smart obstacle. Also, the fact that you can even drive on top of the wall at all is just awesome. It's one of the most fun and satisfying things to try and pull off when you play this course. And then you get to the ending section where you have to pay attention to thwomps moving upwards, and I'm pretty sure that this is the only course in the entire series that does something like this. The layout of this course is just perfect. I literally do not have a single problem with it. It's easily top 3 in the entire game for me. And if that wasn't enough, we then get the most phenomenal ending we possibly could have had for the entire Booster Course Pass. I know I kind of talked about how the difficulty of the original Wii Rainbow Road kind of overshadowed the track's general vibe, and it made me appreciate it a little bit less than everyone else because of it. Not much, but just a bit. However, this version completely fixes that issue, making the difficulty a little bit more manageable, while still making it difficult enough to feel like it's not completely child-proofed, and turning the presentation up to 11. The original looked good, but this remake looks absolutely beautiful, and is absolutely one of the best-looking courses in the entire BCP. The music got a phenomenal upgrade as well. I was so excited when I heard this in the Wave 6 trailer and saw what they did with this track. It fixes pretty much every minor issue I had with the original, and makes everything I loved about it a million times better. One of the best tracks in the entire game for sure. So there we have it, the best course in the entire Booster Course Pass. A lot of these ended up near the middle due to how flip-floppy a lot of them could be, but I think it was worth it for some of the phenomenal selections we had throughout. Hell, if you had showed me that we would be getting this cup at the end of the Booster Course Pass back when it was just starting, I would have been immediately sold. All in all, I think the DLC was definitely worth it for the cups and tracks like these alone. Number 7, the Mario Kart 8 Star Cup. Now I get to one that you were probably all expecting to be at the very top, and honestly, I don't have much justification as to why it's not higher. It's just, like I said, the competition up here is really stiff, and while all the tracks in this cup are great, it's not quite on the same level as some of the stuff that we're going to get to in a minute here. However, this cup is still phenomenal. There's nothing even close to a low point here. We start off with Sunshine Airport, which I really enjoy. I know some people consider this one of their all-time favorites, and while it's not quite at that status for me, I can definitely see where those people are coming from. Dodging the luggage crates, driving under and on the planes, and especially the glider section back down to the airport where you can fly right under the plane, are all really great standout moments. Personally, I just wish you got to spend a little more time in the airport itself. Honestly, this track could have lent itself more well to being a section-based track, maybe having you start inside the airport, and then having the second and third laps take you outside and eventually into the air. I can understand why they wouldn't want to go for that though, since they wouldn't want to have 2 section-based tracks in the same cup, and I can't really see this being placed anywhere else in the track selection. However, even if it does feel a little small, everything that is here is great, and I love racing on this course. Plus little details like the voice lines that play over the intercom inside the airport and the flight schedule showing names of different tracks in the game are fun little touches. Just a really solid course, and I'm glad it's in this game. We then go to Dolphin Shoals, easily one of the best underwater tracks in the entire series. I'm aware that it's not much of a compliment when you're competing with shit like Cheap Lagoon, but still. It finds a way to make underwater driving actually really enjoyable, with this section with a bunch of pipes that blow you upwards that you have to use to clear a gap. Or if you don't want to do that, you can just take this path off to the side. That's a really smart gimmick, and it makes it so that this track will appeal to most people, whether you like floating across the gap, or whether you prefer staying on the ground. Doing tricks on the moray eel is really fun too, and of course this is the main thing that everyone remembers this track for, the sweet saxophone solo that plays once you burst out of the water. Probably the best musical moment in any track ever made. It's just so magical hearing it for the first time. I really love this course, and it's a miracle that a track that primarily takes place in the water never feels like a drag to me and is actually quite fun to race on. Then the quality ramps up again with Electrodrome, which is just such a fun course. I remember first playing Mario Kart Wii on the Wii U at my friend's house, and while I didn't remember too much of it, this track easily stood out in my mind as the one that I wanted to play again the most. And every time I replay it, it's not hard to see why. The bright colors, the exciting music, the little trails that follow behind you and play notes, the green and pink pick-a-path section where you can see everyone who chose the other path driving above you. I'm a loyal pink pather, by the way. The little bumps that play when you drive on the panels right before the glider section. There's just so much to love about this course. Some sections can feel a little basic, but that's not too much of a problem when you're having this much fun. It really does feel like the electronic dubstep variant of Music Park, and I love that track a lot too, so I was bound to like this one. However, literally none of these compare to what this cup ends with, that being Mount Wario. Absolutely the best nitro from the original Mario Kart 8, and it's not even remotely a competition. Not a single section feels boring. I can distinctly remember every single one of them, and the excitement I feel whenever I know what's coming up is unmatched by any other course. From jumping out of the plane to skiing down the ice to driving through the cave to the Wario Dam to the forest section, which might honestly be my favorite part just because of how tough and unforgiving it is, to the ending part where it's a mad dash to the very end while the audience cheers you on as you clear the last few ramps. It's all just so exciting and fun, and it's one of my favorite courses to just run over and over again. I'm not usually big on time trials or setting personal bests on any tracks, but this one is the one that's the most fun to just play over and over again, figure out how I can shave a few extra fractions of a second off in any of the particular sections, and the goddamn trees, which have ruined many a run for me, which is kind of why I love them so much. I never feel more fear when I get to this section in a time trial run. The entire track just has this energy that's completely unmatched by nearly every single other course in this game. And that's not even mentioning the music, which changes and builds as you race the different sections, with more instruments coming in as you get further down the mountain, and the hardest fiddle solo that I have ever heard in my entire life. It's all just so good. Like top 3 courses in the game type of good. I don't think this cup would have shot up so high for me if this course wasn't so incredible. However, the other 3 are good enough to the point where it feels like they can each stand on their own, so it's easy to see why this is one of the most beloved cups in the series. Believe me, I love it too. It's just there are a few cups that I love just a little bit more. Number 6, the Mario Kart 7 Star Cup. Moving right along to the previous Star Cup in the series, this is my favorite Nitro Cup for Mario Kart 7 by a landslide. It's crazy consistent and has some of my favorite courses in the entire game. We start off with Piranha Plant Slide, and I absolutely adore this course. It's such a great love letter to the first platformer of the series, and there's so many great details, from the strong vectored lines on the brakes to the blue Goombas underground, to the blocks and pipes used, to the music track being a reimagining of the Mario Bros. Underground and Overground theme. It's just oozing charm out of every single corner, and on top of that, the course is just really fun to drive on. I love how small and compact the track feels compared to everything else in this game. It provides for a great risk-reward element where you can choose to either ride in the middle through the rushing water to get some extra speed but risk bumping into other players, or play it safe and stay on the outside. Also, while writing the script, I noticed that when you go in the underwater section, the music actually changes to an alternate version. That's an extremely cool detail that I hadn't even noticed until just now, but honestly, it makes this track feel even cooler to me. Plus, the ending glider section that takes you past a castle wall that looks like the one that you see at the end of every Mario level is an awesome touch. It's just such a blast, and I love pretty much everything about it. Ever since I was a kid, this course easily stuck out in my mind as one of my favorites, and I mean, yeah, it doesn't sound like that's changed. It's a fantastic opener to this cup. However, starting off with a banger always leaves you the issue of keeping up that momentum with the next track. Thankfully, this cup does that phenomenally because the next course, Wario Shipyard, is amazing too. I really want to see this course remade in the next game. It's up there with the Woohoo Island courses as tracks in this game where seeing them in a fresh coat of paint would just be the coolest thing ever. I mean, look at this course, it's practically begging for anti-gravity, and a remake that utilizes that would be insane, especially considering that this original course is already pretty insane. Already going off the concept alone, a sunken pirate ship is just such a rad idea for a racetrack, and is one of the most creative things that they could have done with a new underwater driving mechanic. That's utilized perfectly here, having some extremely sharp turns with a few that feel pretty close to 90 degrees, a tunnel made out of a giant fishbone, which is just such an awesome set piece, plenty of pipes with air currents to push you around, a swinging anchor to dodge, and all in all just a stellar layout and atmosphere. My literal only complaint with this track is that I just wish the music was different. Like, this track's music isn't terrible, but just underwhelming for a course like this. If you looked at this track's general vibe, you'd assume it lent itself to more of like an intense rock-style song, maybe something similar to Mario Kart 8's Bowser Castle, but no, instead we get this. It doesn't even feel that pirate-themed or Wario-themed aside from the Wario Land references. Even Rosalina's Ice World, a track that did a rather mediocre job at referencing its source material, still had a song that felt like it fit the stage, but this one just feels subpar. However, that's my only complaint, as the rest of the course is incredible, and then we still keep the momentum going with Neo Bowser City. Aesthetically, this is one of my favorite tracks in the entire game, going for this really cool futuristic look with everything looking really technological, and a really strong color palette of pinks and greens. Plus, it taking place during a storm strangely makes this track pop so much more. The dark blue cloudy night sky fits super well with this track's whole atmosphere. It's one of the Mario Kart tracks that I'd most want to visit in real life because man, does this futuristic Bowser City look like the coolest place to hang out in. I feel like it's really cool that they gave Bowser a track that wasn't just another castle, because this track takes on a much different vibe that I really enjoy. The music also adds to it a lot, being a techno reimagining of a bunch of different themes from across the series. And this game's circuit theme, the main theme, Wii's circuit theme, and Toad's Turnpike, is just one of the coolest tracks to look at and listen to in the entire game. And the layout is great too. It's got some of the sharpest turns in this whole game, and you've really got to watch out on a lot of these hairpins. But that's what makes nailing every drift flawlessly so damn satisfying. It's one of the most fun tracks to get good at in the entire game, and I love it for that. I understand why it's so divisive. I mean, it's not like there's really any obstacles, but I feel like the super challenging turns make up for that, and make this course really engaging as a result. And then to top it all off, we end up with Maka Woohoo. Good lord, what a phenomenal course. It's one of the few tracks in the series to genuinely feel like an adventure the whole way through, and I absolutely love it. The gorgeous sunset skybox, the cave with all the ramps, and some pretty treacherous turns. The final lap is my absolute favorite part though. Driving up and around the mountain and dodging the boulders is an absolute blast, and the final glide all the way down to the finish line is one of the most memorable moments in the entire series for me, with how breathtaking it feels. It's definitely my favorite of the two Woohoo Island tracks, and one of my favorites in this entire game. Just banger after banger in this cup. Everyone talks about how peak 8-star cup is, but I never see this one getting as much love in the community. I'm here to change that, however. This cup deserves to be recognized as one of the most peak ones in the entire series. And you know what? You want to know the craziest part? This isn't even my favorite Star Cup, or my favorite 7 Cup, as we'll see right now, actually. Now we enter the top 5 cups, the big heavy hitters that are easily the standouts of the entire series, and strangely enough, we're starting off with number 5, Mario Kart 7's Banana Cup. Never in a million years would I have predicted that a Banana Cup would end up being my favorite in Mario Kart 7, and I especially never thought it would manage to be among my favorites in the whole series. Hell, the other 3 Banana Cups from the other games didn't even manage to place in the top 45. But just looking at this cup, I mean, yeah, it kinda makes sense. This is one of the most consistent retro cups in the whole series. Starting off with N64 Koopa Troopa Beach, or Koopa Beach as this game disrespectfully dubs it. And honestly, this course just got better with time in my opinion. Not only is it graphically great, I mean, the rock here actually looks like a Koopa now, but it also just plays really nicely. They added a glider ramp up to this shortcut, another glider that you can use to fly past the Koopa Shell rock. The sidesteppers pose a bigger threat now, and you can even drive in the water. This is already one of my favorites from the N64, and they pretty much took everything the original did and made it even better, so I really love this remake. And then we have, what's this? An SNES track, and it's actually good? And it's a Mario circuit? What alternate timeline did I wake up in? Yeah, surprisingly enough, this one's actually really fun to drive. It's mainly because it's the only SNES Mario circuit remake to actually make a significant change to the track, that being this glider ramp. I love this thing, it's so fun to try and pull off shortcuts with it in this big yellow bounce pad. It transforms what would have been a really boring track into something that I believe is actually a solid addition to the cup. If the cup continued with this consistency, I would have placed it high, but certainly not top 5. However, that's when the cup suddenly hits you with 2 of the most popular and amazing tracks in the entire series, completely out of nowhere. First we get Coconut Mall, and while this track did get some visual nerfs in this version, I still think it's fantastic to play. Sure, I do miss the Mii's and the big spherical sign as much as anyone, and some of the difficulty from the escalators is lost, which is a big shame. But other than that, it's still the same great track I always liked. It is probably the weakest version of this track in my opinion. The visual buffs to 8 Deluxe's version make me prefer it just a tiny bit more, but overall this version's very close, and it at least managed to get the parking lot right, unlike some Coconut Mall remakes. Other than that, I mean, yeah, I don't really have too much to say that I didn't already mention for the other versions of Coconut Mall. The music's still great, the concept is still great, it's the same amazing track I always remember, just with a few minor nerfs that sadly couldn't be carried over. And then immediately after we get done playing arguably the best Wii track, we get to play what is arguably the best DS track. Waluigi Pinball is pretty much unchanged from the DS version, but that doesn't make it bad in my opinion. I know some people hate both this and 8's version because no changes were made, but like, if someone were to paint an exact replica of the Mona Lisa and everyone was praising it, you wouldn't call it overrated just because they didn't make any significant changes to it. It's still the Mona Lisa after all. I've talked about how great this track is twice already, and I don't really have anything new to add to be honest. It's still peak and a fantastic closer to this cup. A great addition to the game even if they didn't add Waluigi himself, which honestly should be illegal if you're going to bring this track back. All in all, I could see myself flip-flopping in the future whether I like this cup or the Star Cup more, and honestly I'm still not entirely confident in this placement, but Since one has to go over the other, I'll go with this one just for the sheer amount of confidence it has. I mean, it plays Coconut Mall and Waluigi Pinball one after the other in the same cup. They were obviously trying to get some attention here. Because of all that, this is for sure my favorite cup in Mario Kart 7. If you couldn't tell already, I love this game, and it's got the most solid cup selection in the whole series in my opinion. There's literally only one bad cup, and the rest are incredible and managed to all place within the top half of the list. Some of you may call it nostalgia bias, and some of you may be right, but I don't care. I think even if I remove my nostalgia goggles for this game, my opinion on these cups largely stays the same, and I think it easily deserves the spot as being my favorite game in the series. Still not the best one though, because I mean, 8 Deluxe is the obvious winner in that department. This would have been a really good transition if we were talking about an 8 Deluxe Cup next, but unfortunately we are not. Instead, we're going to be eliminating another game from the ranking with the highest placing Wii Cup on this list. Number 4, Mario Kart Wii's Star Cup. Wii's Star Cup is easily the best one in the series. This cup is filled with instant classics, and I've always loved all of them. It's easily the most consistent cup that we've seen so far, with nothing that could even be remotely considered a low point. Starting with Daisy Circuit, and yeah, I don't really have much else to say about this course that I didn't already cover back when we talked about the Acorn Cup in the BCP. It was really pleasant there, and it's really pleasant here. One thing I would like to note is that this version had a really pretty orange skybox, and while it was kind of carried over to 8 Deluxe, it wasn't nearly as effective there as it is here. I think I prefer the 8 Deluxe version just a tiny bit more because of the new layout and music, but all in all, the two versions of the track are pretty much neck and neck with each other in my opinion. Definitely one of my favorite circuit tracks in the series, which isn't a very high bar to clear, but hey, it makes for an amazing opener to this cup. And then we go to Koopa Cape, finally. Dude, you have no idea how long I've been waiting to talk about the actually good version of Koopa Cape. Like I mentioned a while back, this was my favorite track as a kid, and honestly, it's still among the best in this game. It's just so incredibly fun and has one of my favorite layouts in this game, honestly making this track feel like an amusement park ride. You start in this regular grassy area, reminiscent of a regular ground level in Mario, before you get shot down this rapid river that you have to navigate down, which I love this transition so much. It really feels like you're at the Mario version of Splash Mountain or something. It's helped by how much faster it feels to drive on the water. It's thrilling to speed down here. Plus there's little bits of road off to the side and ramps to take if you want to grab an extra item, or you can go for speed and stay on the water while just trying to grab item box floating by. I love this gimmick a lot. It makes this track feel super open and it gives you a lot of options. And then there's my favorite bit, the underwater section obviously. I've always loved how this area looks. Since this was before underwater driving was actually a thing, instead you're closed into this underwater tube and it's really cool. It feels like one of those tunnels you go through in an aquarium where you can see all the fish around you, and hey, those are always my favorite parts of an aquarium, so I was pretty much destined to like this track. That's not all though, there's also the unique electric obstacles that I really love. You have to be very careful because if you don't make it past them, you get electrocuted and shrunk. I love this obstacle. It can easily screw you over when you're not paying attention, but it feels so rewarding when you weave through them flawlessly. And the music is the cherry on top, feeling really chaotic and fun on the surface, but feeling more mellow and pretty when you're underwater. This track is amazingly designed and I love it so much. The main reason why I have so much disdain for what 8 Deluxe and 7 did to this track is because I have so much fondness of the original. I'll always adore it, and I hope one day a remake actually does it justice. And then, immediately after one of the best tracks in the game, we get one of the best tracks in the game. I've already talked about Maple Treeway twice and how much I love it, and I mean, like with Daisy Circuit, I don't really have too much more to add, except that this version has the jack-off bridge, so it has that going for it over the others. Although even if this might be blasphemous to say, I actually kind of prefer having a glider here. It opens up all these alternate paths that you'd never take, as if this was still a rope bridge. Still, the bridge is iconic, so it is sad to see it go, and yeah, I don't really know what else to add. This track is peak, and it's always been peak. And then we finish out the cup with Grumble Volcano, which is also peak. Man, this cup is amazing. I adore this track's gimmick, taking place by a volcano and having the track become more perilous and broken as the laps progress. I think the concept of having a track that gets harder and harder to play as the race goes on is an absolutely incredible idea, and they execute it very well here in my opinion. The music sells how intense everything is, the lava looks really good, and so does the interior of this cave wall. The fireballs landing everywhere on the track can be really tricky to navigate, and the fork in the road at the end is a great way to split up the players. Plus the track genuinely does get quite difficult by the end of it with how skinny some of the roads can be. It's one of the trickiest tracks in this game, and I think that it makes for a great end to the Star Cup since it shows you that this game has officially stopped messing around, and that you need to prepare yourself for what's to come in the final cup of the game. It's awesome and a fantastic closer to this cup. All in all, this cup is easily the best one in Mario Kart Wii. Revisiting this game made me really surprised at how generally solid its Nitro selection is. I mean, all of them placed within the top 20. If it weren't for the Retro Cups being so mid, this might have been in contention for the best cup selection in the series. We'll find out where it actually placed at the end, but as it stands, Mario Kart Wii is a fantastic game with some banger tracks, and I'm glad I got to revisit it again for this video. Now to eliminate one more game from the ranking, and actually our second to last game to eliminate. We have the best special cup in the series by far, and the best cup that Mario Kart Double Dash has to offer. Number 3, Mario Kart Double Dash's Special Cup. The reason that I think this cup works so well and is placing so highly is not only because I love all of the tracks, but also because it works really, really well as the final cup in the game in a unique way that makes it stand out from every other cup in the series, in my opinion. I'll explain what I mean by that in a minute, but first let's talk about the tracks that this cup has to offer. Starting with Wario Coliseum, and I am so sad that this track hasn't been remade yet. It's so fun, and a remake of it in a modern game with anti-grav and gliding would be absolutely phenomenal. There's plenty of ramps and jumps to go off of, and all of the parts without jumps have pretty sharp turns to keep you on your toes. I especially love this really big ramp leading to this big cage right here. If there's a Bowser shell or another giant item in this area, it can be pretty nerve-wracking to try and land down here. This is followed by a really long turn, which might be boring in a game with a regular drift system, but in Double Dash's wacky engine, this turn is really exciting to pull off. That goes for all of the turns in this course, to be honest. It feels like it's built to be as fun as possible in this game's engine, and because of that, it's a big standout to me. My favorite part has to be this last big jump over the pit, though. You can either take the wider, safer turn and basically guarantee yourself an item, or you can take the jump, which is much faster but much more dangerous, and you risk not getting an item. I just really like the strategy that presents. Also, the track is so long that they shortened it to 2 laps instead of 3, making this track feel a lot more unique from a lot of the others in this game. I dig this track, I think it's really fun. Then we go to Dino Dino Jungle. I really enjoy this course. I already talked about how much I like the 7 version, but this version has the perk of being a lot more slippery, making the bridge section feel way more treacherous. Other than that, yeah, I don't really have too much to say that I didn't already mention. This course is really fun, super difficult, and very satisfying once you finally get it right. And we get treated to what, at the time, was the best Bowser Castle and Rainbow Road, and honestly they're still both up there for me, even after all this time. Starting with Bowser Castle, again demonstrating how the 3D games are so amazing at making fantastic obstacle courses out of Bowser-themed tracks. This track just does so many little things so well. The placement of the flubs feels specifically placed to be a scary hazard, since they're either coming down one at a time or smack dab in the middle of the road. This section with the enormous firebar that you have to weave between to get an item is great, as the first canonical appearance of the giant Bowser statue, and it's utilized very well here, having you drive toward it with the fireballs coming at you head on, and then having you drive away from it with the fireballs chasing you. My favorite detail though has to be the change to the arrow signs. Look at them, they're so mad. This track is also quite difficult, making it serve as this perfect penultimate challenge before the big finale, that being Rainbow Road. And wow, what a big finale it is. This Rainbow Road is just such a perfect spectacle to end your game on, feeling so beautiful and grand. It actually gives me similar vibes to the N64 Rainbow Road remake in 8 Deluxe, feeling like a celebratory victory lap for completing the game, with the music cheering you on and the look of the road itself being fantastic. Mushroom City being below you is also a great touch. It makes it feel like you're up in the sky, but still not quite in space. Though there's no way that this is architecturally sound. If you fall off this road, you're probably canonically killing a family of 4. However, unlike N64 Rainbow Road, this track doesn't focus solely on being a victory lap, as it also offers a lot of difficulty too. People have been talking for years about which way is better when designing a Rainbow Road, but honestly, I think it's good to sort of combine the two to at least some degree. And pretty much every Rainbow Road does that, except the Rainbow Road from the original Mario Kart 64, which is the only bad one. However, this one does that better than most Rainbow Roads in the series, in my opinion. It's so majestic and fun while also being pretty damn hard to get down. This can easily screw up your entire Special Cup run, but because of that, I find getting to this track so exciting. There's also a ton of little touches that I adore, like the stars that rain down on the track that you can actually use in the giant rainbow tunnel. Anyone else feel like they're going through like a giant rainbow-colored straw here? This is one of my favorite Rainbow Roads in the series, and I love it a lot. Now, the tracks in this cup are fantastic, but in my opinion, what really makes it great and shoots it to number 3 in the list is, 1, how well it's ordered, having the cup get harder and harder and more of a spectacle as it goes on. And then also the fact that the difficulty of the tracks here, combined with the difficulty of Double Dash's control scheme in general, makes this one of, if not the most difficult cup in the series. But I absolutely love it for that, and it serves perfectly as your final challenge to the game. This cup took me the longest to beat out of any cup I played for this video, and because of that, beating it felt like more of an accomplishment than anything I had done up to that point. It's that reason why I think this cup works so incredibly well as a closer to this game, and I also think it's helped by the fact that the cup's track selection is pretty much perfect. It's because of all those reasons why I believe this cup is the best special cup in the series, and the best cup in all of Mario Kart Double Dash, but not quite the best cup in the series in general, however. Now it's time for our top 2 cups, both hailing from Mario Kart 8. It's almost like this game is really good or something, don't tell anyone I said that though. These 2 cups are about as close to perfect as you can get. For the first of these 2, and the best Lightning Cup in the entire series, hell, even just the best Retro Cup of the entire series, we have number 2, Mario Kart 8's Lightning Cup. God, what a solid selection here. Some of the finest remakes in this entire game, if I'm being honest. We start off with TikTok Cluck, and this one has always stood out to me as one of the coolest remakes in this entire game. I mean, when you look at this compared to the DS version, which was already phenomenal, by the way, I mean, damn, what a glow-up. It really takes what the original was going for and expands upon it in every possible way. They somehow go even more all-out with the theme here, making the clock hands so that you can drive on them now, and turning them into a really compelling shortcut opportunity, since you don't always want to use them, but depending on where they are when you see them, it could also be really helpful to you. It's such a smart mechanic for a track like this, and it makes repeat playthroughs just as great as ever. I know some people are mad that they added a glider to the spinning gear section, but honestly, the fact that it's optional and it doesn't have too much of a speed difference compared to the main path means I don't personally feel very bothered by it. The graphical glow-up is great too. The original was great, but admittedly very graphically simple, but this takes the original's visuals and turns them up to 11, to the point where I honestly feel like this is how the inside of a giant clock would actually look like. I didn't even mention that the starting line is an alarm clock. That's just a cute little detail and a track already filled to the absolute brim with charm. I love this remake so much, and it's a fantastic opener to this cup. Then we go to Piranha Plant Slide, and admittedly while I used to be sour over this one, since in my opinion the graphical update actually hindered a lot of the charm the original had, removing the blue Goombas and the strong vectored brick walls, but honestly, coming back to this version, aside from those little tweaks, I mean, yeah, this is still amazing. Everything I said about the original still stands true, but they added a ton of little changes like the ending pipe being anti-gravity and feeling much more twisty and turny as a result, and the pipe that you come out of at the end now shooting you upwards, making it feel like the end of a Mario level. Plus, the track just looks great, even I can't deny that. The water, the interior of the pipes, it all just looks really slick, and it's great to see this track in HD. Yeah, I think I finally can admit that I still love this version of the track just as much as the original. I was in denial for a long time, but I mean, yeah, this is phenomenal. Then we have Grumble Volcano as the penultimate track, and, you know, if you're not going to have your penultimate retro track be a Bowser's Castle, which Lord knows this series doesn't like doing, this is pretty much the best alternative you can go with. It's extremely perilous, intense, and frightening, and it serves really well as being your final real challenge in the game. They added a couple gliders, which are appreciated, but other than that, there aren't really many changes from the Wii version to here, and honestly, there didn't really need to be. This track serves its role perfectly as being the intense final boss of the game, and I love it for that. And then we finish off with N64 Rainbow Road, and oh my god, this course is amazing now. The original sucked, but it's reimagined in such an amazing way here that it's honestly one of my favorites in the entire game. Not only does it look great, obviously, but it also just perfectly serves the role of being your victory lap after finishing the entire game. It doesn't really focus on being extremely difficult and testing your skills to the absolute limit. That was Grumble's job. Instead, it constantly cheers you on with the exciting music and vibrant fireworks, and gives you an absolutely phenomenal treat to end the game off with. It's not meant to piss you off or ruin your playthrough of the cup, it's just meant to make you reminisce on your happy memories of the game. Because of that, I think it's a fantastic end to this game's original selection, and it really ties this together as being the most well-put-together Lightning Cup in the series. And then I've also heard the argument that, oh, but it's only 1 lap now instead of 3. It's too short now. Yeah, have fun holding down the A button while seeing an obstacle once every minute, you goober. A track being 6 minutes long with minimal obstacles and mandatory railings is not my idea of a good track. A track does not have to be a pacer test to qualify as difficult enough to be a Rainbow Road, because honestly, this didn't have to be difficult at all. All it had to do was tie together the whole game in a satisfying way, and it absolutely succeeds at that and then some. A fantastic closer to this cup. What a solid cup in general, to be honest. We start and end off on the best notes that we possibly could, and then we have 2 courses that I love to death in the middle. It's pretty much the most perfect cup you could ask for. So what could have possibly have ranked above it? I'm gonna be honest, before I even started working on this ranking, before I replayed through any of the games to prepare, hell, before I even got the idea to make this ranking in the first place, I knew that this cup was gonna be my favorite one. When I actually did play through the games in preparation for the ranking, I played 8 Deluxe first since it's the biggest one and I wanted to get it out of the way first. And surely enough, as I expected, this was the number 1 cup in the game. And as I slowly played through every single other game and every single other cup in the series, my initial thoughts were slowly proved more and more right, as this cup still stayed as the uncontested number 1 in the series as I outlined in the video. The cup with the most solid track selection, the absolute best level any of these games has to offer, is number 1, the Mario Kart 8 Bell Cup. This cup goes beyond having no stinkers. It goes beyond just being ordered well. It goes above and beyond every fundamental a good cup has. It, in my opinion, not only has the absolute best track selection in the entire series, but also only keeps getting consistently better the longer the cup goes on. I have nothing I could say about this cup that could even remotely be considered a problem. Even the weakest track in the cup to me, Neo Bowser City, is still like top of A tier for me. It's everything I liked about the original, but now even better because it's in glowing HD. It makes the aesthetic pop so much more and easily makes this an upgrade. And even though that's the only main change, I mean, It's not like the layout itself needed much changing. It's one of those tracks like Music Park where it was pretty much always perfect at what it tried to do, and it didn't even really need any significant changes aside from the graphical update. It's still hard as shit, the music is still great, and it's still really, really satisfying to get good at. I still love it just as much as I always have, and I will keep picking it online, damn it. I don't care what the Neo Bowser City haters say. Anyway, yeah, I definitely have the least to say about this one out of any of the tracks in this cup, but the other three are easily some of the finest in the entire series, to be honest. Ribbon Road is one of the most awesome remakes a retro track has ever gotten. It's super creative with its theme, changing the aesthetic of the track so that it now takes place in a child's bedroom, and it makes this track really neat visually. It also allows for some pretty neat obstacles like the Mecha Koopas and the Clown Cars. And the layout of the track is honestly one of my favorites in the entire game, especially once you get to the blue ribbon. It's pretty tricky to stay on, but super satisfying if you do, and it gives you some great ways to catch up like the waves in the road and these two shortcuts. It's one of my favorite comeback tracks in the entire game because it provides a great way for you to feel like you still have a chance in the race even if you're far away from the lead. But since these shortcuts and the waves are completely skill-based and don't require an item, it also makes it so that this isn't purely a bagging track like, for example, Cheeseland. And to be clear, I think Cheeseland is still chaotic enough to be a decently fun time in spite of that, but I like this approach way much more. It provides a risk-reward element that I really love. The blue ribbon might honestly be one of my favorite sections out of any Mario Kart course. The rest of the track is great too, having plenty of off-road that can also provide for some great shortcut opportunity, a really cool gliding section where you have to dodge these toy clown cars on springs, and just an all-around amazing atmosphere. I really love this track. It's one of my favorite remakes in the entire series just because of how creative, fun, and thrilling it is. Plus it also keeps up some of the difficulty that Neo Bowser City had, which is appreciated because this is the last cup of the game. Or at least it was. That difficulty still gets carried over with Super Bell Subway. I just love everything about this track. It's so endlessly fun and charming, and it's perfect for pretty much any kind of player. If you love the trains as an obstacle, like I do, it can be a really fun challenge to try and weave between them and predict when they're going to come. It's the most satisfying feeling in the world to perfectly thread the needle between them, and it makes this track a great challenge. However, if you don't want that, there's plenty of alternative routes you can take. None of them are too far out of the way, and they don't really slow you down, so it makes it perfect for if you think the trains are a little too much. I love this dynamic. It makes it so that it's easy for anyone to enjoy this track, and it makes this subway tunnel such a fun setting for this track. It perfectly mixes chaos and skill, which is something I really love in a Mario Kart course. And that's not even mentioning all of the other cool details, like the names of the other tracks as subway stops or the graffiti on the underground walls. And I almost forgot to mention, the song is an absolute banger. One of my favorite songs in the game, to be honest. I love how catchy the melody is, and how perfect the instrumentation is for a track like this, focusing on brass for the melody, accordion, which feels like the type of thing you'd hear here, and a tinny synth and marimba, which both feel like the type of thing you'd hear in the jingle of a place like this over the intercom. And then as soon as you go underground, the music abruptly changes, now switching the bassline to a really groovy rendition of the SMB Underground theme, which makes sense because you are underground now. Both versions are extremely pleasant to listen to, and adds to the world building of this track so much more. I just love this track so much. It's one of my favorites to play in this entire game. And then if that wasn't enough, we get to end off the cup with Big Blue, one of, if not the absolute best track in this entire game. Scratch that, in this entire series. I mean, where do I even begin? The music is incredible and one of the best songs in this entire series. The anti-gravity is utilized incredibly well, having some really great set pieces like this conveyor spiral in the sky rotating around you as you play. This is the kind of stuff that I always expected from anti-gravity as a gimmick, and this track pulls it off better than all of them combined. The coin strips from Mute City make a return, allowing you to go from 0 to top speed in a matter of seconds. The track is split up into 3 sections instead of laps, which is an amazing gimmick for this track, because while Mount Wario used that gimmick to feel like an adventure, this track uses it to feel like an absolute roller coaster ride. And the layout is just phenomenal, taking literally every chance it can to get you to go as fast as possible. There's conveyor belts, rushing water, off-road cuts, anti-grav boosters, speed pads, literally anything that you can think of that can make you go faster on a track, this track probably has. It even has a completely shroomless shortcut where you can just jump over an entire turn, which is always so thrilling to try and pull off. It's just so incredible how this track is perfect at literally everything that it tries to do. It gives me the most relentless joy and excitement out of any track in this entire franchise, and it is without a doubt one of the best things that Nintendo has ever put out. It makes for the absolute perfect ending to this cup and to this game. This cup is just absolute peak from start to finish. It does everything right. The tracks are good, they're ordered well, the cup is fairly difficult and keeps getting more difficult as it goes on, every song slaps, it's just... This is it. This is the best cup that the Mario Kart series has to offer by far, and I don't think anything will ever change that. Unless the next game is something better, but really, I kinda doubt that, because this is the kind of perfection that only happens once. It feels like an absolute miracle that they got it this right. I can't think of a better end to this long, long journey than this cup. That being said, I think it's finally time to bring this video to a close. Before I go though, here's the average ranking of every game in the series based on how good its cups are. Keep in mind, this isn't my definitive ranking of all of the games in the series, just what the averages say. Super Mario Kart is at the bottom, to the surprise of nobody probably. Next is Mario Kart 64, which is again not too surprising. In 7th is Mario Kart DS, which was actually a little shocking to me at first, but I guess the bad retro cups really dragged it down, and come to think of it, only 3 of the cups are all that good anyway. Next in 6th is the Booster Course Pass, and right above it in 5th is Mario Kart 8, which did kind of surprise me, but I guess a lot of these cups ended up placing around the middle, so it does make sense. And 4th is Super Circuit, placing much higher than I expected. 3rd is Wii, 2nd is Double Dash, and then 1st, as expected, is Mario Kart 7. I also have some more statistics and rankings in a document that I'll put in the description if you're curious for some other stuff, like what's the best mushroom cup in the series, or what cup variety tends to be the best, or etc, stuff like that. This is by far the biggest project that I've ever done, but I loved working on it the entire time, and I hope you all enjoyed watching it as much as I enjoyed making it. This started out as a 100 subscriber special, but by the time that this comes out, I might hit higher, so I'll kind of just decide what milestone this is meant to represent once I actually finish the video. In any case, I thank you all for sticking with me through this very, very long video, and for all of the support. It really does mean a lot to me, and hopefully we can keep growing this channel to even bigger heights. I know that this video was kind of a mess at certain points. It's definitely not perfect. I did have to cut some corners at certain parts, but I'm just really glad to have it done, and to have a 3-hour video to my name. But all in all, I'm just really, really glad to have made this, and I'm also never going to do anything like it again for a very long time, because yeah, doing a 3-hour video is I don't have the stamina for it. But in any case, I hope you enjoyed it anyway. If you did make it through this far to the end of the video, that alone really does mean a lot to me, that you were able to handle 3 hours of my yapping. But in any case, have a serviceable day, and I'll catch you in the next one.